Welcome back to Behind the Universe, Raw vs. SmackDown. Last time we covered the second half-ish of WWE 2K15. Right now, Monday Night Raw has the lead 9-7, and in the overall pay-per-view rankings, it's Money in the Bank and Payback that take the top two, with TLC from WWE 2K14 in at number 3. This time we're going to be covering probably the first half of WWE 2K16. I have a feeling I'm going to have a lot to say about this, just like I did with 2K15, so thinking maybe we're going to get SummerSlam, Night of Champions, and possibly King of the Ring this episode. And the next time we can do Battleground, Survivor Series, and Fastlane. But we'll see how things play out. Maybe I can also get Battleground in this episode. Who knows? More so towards the later portions of WWE 2K17 going into 2K18. I think I'm going to have to change the style of this series a bit, because now nowadays I try to focus more on not just beforehand. For the first several years of my universe mode, all the big payoffs would happen at pay-per-views. The only, I guess, significant things that would typically happen on the average Raw or SmackDown or main event even was that there'd be the number one contender matches and maybe the occasional title match here and there. Like, I know in 2K14, for example, we had a United States Championship match between Jack Swagger and Roman Reigns. So the title did change hands there, and that played into the following pay-per-view. But for more so, this happened late into 2K17, so it won't be much of an issue right now. But nowadays, I try to focus more on, this is the thing I picked up from Murph's YT13, is to try to have some smaller payoffs on the regular shows and not just save everything for pay-per-views, because in doing that, then the regular shows lose their importance. If nothing ever happens on Raw or SmackDown, you can basically just skip all of those and just kind of pick up at the pay-per-views and just kind of, you don't understand everything that's going on, you don't get the full context, but then you can at least kind of get the gist of what's happening, what the rivalry is about, and just go from there. So definitely for the older, prior to this time period, you could definitely just go back through my series and just watch the pay-per-views, and I think you could get a pretty clear idea of where I'm going with the series. You don't necessarily have to go back and watch all the episodes of Raw, SmackDown, and Main Event to understand everything. I mean, it'll give you the full context. You'll kind of get to see how things develop, and if you want to see how my production style or commentary evolved, you can go back and check those out. But really, unless you're a completionist, you don't really need to go back and watch those older episodes of Raw and SmackDown. You can kind of get by with just what happens on the pay-per-views. And I've been trying to change that recently, try to make it more of a full package. So nowadays, for example, I did the thing with John Cena and Chris Jericho. At Extreme Rules, they got into a backstage brawl, and then in the following month, it led up to a singles match that took place on SmackDown, and that was the payoff. They didn't need a big pay-per-view match because it wasn't that scale of a feud. It was just something for the two guys to do, a way to get Cena a win and set him up for the obviously the Battleground Fatal 4-Way, which I don't know, but this shouldn't come out until after Battleground's up. So I don't think it's spoiling really anything to say that that's what it was setting up. Him beating Jericho was to give him a credible win, so that way, building off of his prior history, he'd be right in line for a title shot. So it was it was important, and I could discuss that in regards to the Fatal 4-Way whenever I get to 2K18 Battleground. But it was important in setting up his status and getting him there. But there could also be other feuds that I do in the future where, yeah, it's to build credibility for a guy and just keep people in the mix, but it might not necessarily build to a specific pay-per-view match, because, if I'm building up a monster or just some guy who's just beating people, for example, look at the stuff I did with Ty Dillinger and Tyler Breeze. They didn't have a pay-per-view match out of that. It was just 2 one-on-one matchups, but it gave Ty Dillinger a win, and it doesn't really build to a specific match, so it's not like it was in service of an ultimate goal. It was just Dillinger beats Breeze, and he looks strong coming in off his debut, and that will give him momentum towards whatever he does next, but it's not strictly tied to that. It's not part of a story. It's its own little thing, self-contained rivalry, and then Dillinger moves on from there with the 2 wins in his pocket. And then Tyler Breeze, well, then he gets his ego put in check, and he has to figure out where to go from there. But getting back to 2K16, we kick off the year with the SummerSlam pay-per-view. And at the start of this, we have Seth Rollins versus Shane McMahon. That was the opening matchup. Seth Rollins, he is pulling double duty tonight. Of course, he'll take on Dean Ambrose later on in the night. So this was obviously a Raw matchup. This was kind of a way for me to tie up the Seth Rollins versus Triple H rivalry, the whole plot thread thing that I did with Stephanie McMahon that I later just kind of abandoned. Because, like, when Stephanie returned in 2K17 to announce, like, the women's division, I just didn't really acknowledge who took her out. I kind of just wanted to bury that storyline altogether because I didn't know where I was going with it. I didn't have an idea for, like, who was the ultimate person who took her out. Where's the payoff for this? There was no payoff. It was just like, oh, the Shield are looking dominant, and Triple H needs a reason to be upset, so is Stephanie McMahon taken out? And, like, even at the time that I did that, it was, like, shifting the blame. Like, it wasn't the Shield's responsibility. It was intentionally, like, I was going to give it to someone else, but I never decided who that was going to go to. And then a couple years passed, and it's like, well, this plot thread's just kind of dangling there. Let me just cut it off and just stash it away in some cupboard forever and just never bring it up again. Only I'm bringing it up here, so it's kind of counterintuitive. But this match with Shane McMahon, Seth Rollins had already defeated Triple H at Money in the Bank, so it was a way for Triple H to get, like, payback on him without actually being involved. Although it wasn't really Triple H who did it. Like, the plan, the way that this was set up was that before Triple H had been taken out by Seth at Money in the Bank, and I think he was put in the hospital with injuries from that match. But Triple H, he'd kind of set up a backup plan, like, if I were to lose, then this guy, Shane McMahon, is going to come in and take my place. So, while Triple H was gone, because at this point, really, it's just Paul Heyman running the show. He's the Raw general manager. And then Kane will later come in on this show as the director of operations. That was my way of getting in the corporate Kane, making that connected to the series. So from this point, Heyman and Kane kind of run things until Triple H returns in 2K17. But for now, this was kind of his last act of defiance, was that Shane McMahon could get a match with him. And then, of course, I wanted Dean Ambrose versus Seth Rollins at SummerSlam. So, of course, Ambrose came back. That was also part of, like, Shane's plan to set him up. So, Seth Rollins had to work double duty. He fought Ambrose later in the night, but to kick off the show, he went up against Shane McMahon. And the matchup was good, it was okay. It wasn't really anything spectacular, I'd say, but for the time, it was a really good show opener. Because it was, I think it was some sort of no-holds-barred match, so there were weapons involved. I just remember the one spot where Seth Rollins dives to the outside, and Shane was holding the ladder, so he bounces around because the game was glitching out because there was no animation for that. But it looked like a cool spot. He just dove on the ladder and the ladder crushed Shane, or maybe it was the other way around. Maybe Shane dove on Seth. That might have been what happened. But then, of course, you get Shane's trademark elbow drop through the announce table from the top rope. That had to be in there. Overall, I think it was a fun match. It wasn't like a show stealer or anything, and I've certainly done hardcore matches like that better since then, but for a guy like Shane McMahon, who's kind of just a spot monkey in most instances, like that's what he's around for. He takes the crazy bumps. So, I mean, that's what makes his matches exciting. Usually. Although now I think he's gotten better. I of course, I don't watch the main product nowadays, but from what I understand, like, he's been putting on some good matches with guys like AJ Styles and Kevin Owens, which is weird that he's still wrestling, even though he's not the general manager, but he's the, what's the position? You have the Raw general manager, and then you have the commissioner for that show, or whatever the heck they're called. Either way, Shane is not like an active superstar on the roster, but yet he still competes and takes away spots from the current day superstars. And SmackDown's the land of opportunity, but here Shane is getting pay-per-view matches, and he's getting a lot of them, because he was on WrestleMania when he fought AJ Styles, and he fought Kevin Owens at Hell in the Cell. What is WWE doing? Why is Shane still wrestling? I don't know. Like, you want to bring him back on a couple occasions, that's fine, but, I mean, I don't know, I don't think he should be competing as much as he does, because he was at last year's Survivor Series too, and I don't know what he's going to be doing moving forward, but I have a feeling he's still going to have plenty of matches to go, because you have the thing with Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, and Shane was kind of involved in that, so I don't know if he's going to keep doing stuff there. Either way, that's a bit of a tangent. Here, in my universe mode for SummerSlam, Shane comes back, and he puts up a good fight against Rollins. an entertaining way to kick off the show, but obviously Seth Rollins wins in the end, pretty convincingly. I think he hits him with a curb stomp and then a Phoenix Splash. That was my way of introducing the Phoenix Splash, because I think this was the first year it was actually in the game. Other than that springboard Phoenix Splash, which they've had for ages, but I never really knew what it was until Seth Rollins used the Phoenix Splash, and I'm like, oh, that's that move. That's what that does. So Seth wins here. It was a good opening match. Nothing really that I haven't said left to cover it. And then after that was, I believe, the Intercontinental Championship 2 out of 3 falls match. But this was also an open challenge, because at this point, really the matchup between, well, I'll get to that later. But in the build-up to this matchup, what had happened was Titus, of course, he had just defeated Tyson Kidd at Money in the Bank. And then on an episode of Main Event, I think it was the first episode of Main Event, actually. Either that or it was the second. No, it was the second episode of Main Event. Because Stardust had debuted, and he fought Cesaro in a match, a U.S. Championship Open Challenge, where Cesaro was issuing it to a SmackDown superstar. So that was a way to kind of open that up. So Cesaro fought him, but then Stardust randomly leaves the match to be all bizarre and weird and stuff. Like, what is his end goal? We don't know, because he's Stardust and he's freaky. What happened to Cody Rhodes? So that happens, Stardust leaves, and then Cesaro wins by countout, so he's celebrating his victory on his way up the ramp. And then Titus O'Neil comes out for his match, but his entrance interrupts Cesaro's victory. So they cross paths, have a bit of a stare down before they just kind of bump shoulders, and Cesaro heads to the back. Titus goes on to defeat DDP, I think. I think that's who he fought on that night. So then there was kind of a back and forth between Titus and Cesaro, so since Cesaro was doing the U.S. Championship Open Challenge thing, Titus said, okay, I'm going to issue an Open Challenge at SummerSlam, but I'm going to do you one better. I'm going to make it a 2 out of 3 falls match. And then, of course, Cesaro answers back doing a United States Championship Open Challenge Championship Scramble match. That was crazy. But here, Titus O'Neil gets his 2 out of 3 falls match. Anybody can answer the challenge. And who is it but Darren Young, Titus O'Neil's former tag team partner and former rival. So these two fight for the Intercontinental title. I believe Darren Young gets the first fall. So things are looking fishy for Titus O'Neil. But Titus comes back and he kind of plays tricky. Gets Clash of the Titus, puts away Darren Young for his fall. And then after, I think this was a point where Darren was coming in off of his fall. Like, he had just recovered, but Titus immediately blasts him to keep the advantage. They go back and forth for a bit, but in the end, Titus O'Neil wins the third fall and retains the Intercontinental Championship. This was the last time that Titus O'Neil and Darren Young would have a singles match, and I think it was good. It was a good way to, for a final match in their feud, I think it was a really good way to end it. Obviously, this was setting up Titus versus Cesaro at Night of Champions, the title versus title match, so Titus was not going to lose here. And I know, looking back on this feud, it's, I like the Primetime Players feud. It was a candidate for Rivalry of the Year for the Slammy Awards for that time. But the thing about this feud was that Titus, I know Darren had won beforehand, the King of the Ring qualifier back in 2K14, but nobody really remembered that match, and it wasn't that memorable. And then I think there was another SmackDown match earlier in 2K15 that they had fought, but I think it was right after the Wyatt family thing. No, because that's when they split. I don't remember when exactly that happened, but he had another match with Titus and he won. But those matches weren't really memorable. They weren't high profile because they were just on SmackDown. So the thing about this feud is that, yeah, Titus O'Neil, it starts off with he has the inferiority complex, but he goes on to win the Intercontinental title. He takes the upper hand, and then he defeats Darren Young at Payback. So that kind of does away with that inferiority complex. Obviously, Titus is now proving himself to be the stronger link in the team. But then with Darren Young, he doesn't really get any wins. He doesn't do anything significant in this rivalry. He just loses to Titus O'Neil at Elimination Chamber. He fails at WrestleMania to capture the title. He loses again at Payback, and he loses again at SummerSlam. So, honestly, one of my bigger failings in 2K16 was that I didn't really do anything with Darren Young. Which now that, obviously the plan around this time, I knew that eventually I wanted the Primetime Players to get back together to reform as a tag team. The whole thing with the singles feud was that they would go their separate ways, kind of define themselves as single stars, but then they would eventually bridge that gap. They would mend their issues, and then they would become the primetime players again, and they would finally win the tag team titles. The tag team titles that had eluded them for the entire series up to this point, which they do end up doing. The only issue with this is that Darren Young is an afterthought. Like, I didn't do anything with him beyond this, really. Yeah, he does get an Intercontinental title match at Survivor Series, but he loses to Stardust, because I wanted to do, I had been building up Stardust, and I wanted him to win the title, because Cody Rhodes had also had a very long journey to the Intercontinental title, but I'll talk more about that Intercontinental title match when I get to it. But here, Darren is, like, he's just the afterthought. Like I said, I could have done more with him, and the whole reuniting of the primetime players would have been strengthened if Darren Young had actually contributed to the series in any major way. But I didn't really do much with him. He was just the guy to put over Titus ONeil to make him look like a big threat, which he did do, but he didn't really do anything of his own accord. So a bit of a shortcoming on my part. And when they did reunite, yeah, it was weakened a little bit because of it. But now Darren Young has been released from WWE, which I was kind of expecting would happen, because really WWE has done nothing with the primetime players. So the fact that I could do anything with even just Titus ONeil, I thought was a testament, because he was a single star for a while in WWE, and they did jack shit with him. So I came in and I kind of repackaged him a bit, boosted him up to the Intercontinental Championship picture. Heck, he almost won the WWE title in my series. He won the King of the Ring tournament. He was in the main event of Survivor Series. Titus did a lot. But Darren Young, not so much. And now that Darren's gone, it's like, well, are they going to get rid of Titus too in the WWE? I think Titus is actually doing something there now, but I don't know what all he's doing. I think he's got Titus brand, but I don't know who he's working with. I think it's Tozawa. I think I remember seeing that, but I don't know. Because then at that point, like, when Darren Young's gone now, the way I write him off, I don't know how I'm going to do it yet, how things are going to work. But if Titus sticks around, he at least has credibility. So I guess if WWE was going to release anybody, it was better that it was Darren, because I haven't done as much with him. But I'm kind of getting a bit off track here. After that, we had, I believe it was Adrian Neville versus Corey Graves. I think that came up next. Now, this was a match I got a little bit of flack for, because it was obviously WWE 2K15 footage, because Corey Graves was not in 2K16. He had retired. He was done wrestling, so they took him out of the game. So I couldn't use that, so I used 2K15 footage instead. So Adrian Neville fought Corey Graves here, a match that Graves might have even won. I talked about this in Pretend It Never Happened, that I had bigger plans for Corey Graves, but then he got injured and had to retire, so I kind of had to scrap that. So Adrian Neville got his win back after, because obviously this was set up back at Over the Limit when Corey Graves attacked Adrian Neville after his match with Bo Dallas, after his victory there. He injured his leg, so Adrian Neville returns in the build-up to SummerSlam and defeats Corey Graves. I later retconned this match into a King of the Ring qualifier, so not only did Adrian Neville defeat Corey Graves, but he'll be in the King of the Ring tournament now, which is cool. I keep forgetting to identify which match is with which brand. Seth Rollins and Shane was Raw. The Intercontinental title match was obviously SmackDown, and this match was also SmackDown. Then we had next I believe was the Divas title 6-woman battle royal between Paige, Tamina Snuka, Emma, Naomi, Natalya, and Nikki Bella. Now, this was obviously at the point where the Divas division was winding down. After this pay-per-view, I make the announcement that I'm going to be disbanding the division because, like, I was trying to revive it here. I had this big battle royal to really kick things up, but honestly, it was also a bit of laziness on my part. But, like, I hadn't been building a strong contender. Like, we just came off the triple threat with Paige, Tamina, and Emma, and Paige had just won the title back after the title had been flip-flopping between her and Tamina for a bit. So, not even Paige was really established as a credible champion. So this battle royal was supposed to do that, like have her overcome these 5 women, these 5 challengers. I think the plan was for Paige to win, but because it's a battle royal, I obviously couldn't control anything, so it was kind of up to chance a bit to see what would happen. But Paige retains. Natalya comes back. She starts to regain relevance. This is basically the end for Tamina and Emma, and Naomi was just kind of the 6th name. She was just kind of there. Nikki Bella being here obviously would this was me trying to put some credibility on her because obviously Brie had been the Divas champion before. She had the spotlight, but at this point, the Bellas had broken apart and Nikki appeared to be the standout. Like, she seemed to be a better wrestler. Brie was always kind of mocked as the lesser of the two as far as, like, in-ring ability goes. So I was putting more emphasis on Nikki at this time. Now, I mean, it is kind of debatable. I didn't really see a whole lot of their singles work beyond this point because obviously I fell out of watching WWE. I think the last time I watched Raw was Daniel Bryan's retirement speech. So anything that happened beyond that with Brie and Nikki, I really don't know. But at this point, I was going with Nikki because Brie already had her time in the spotlight at WrestleMania. She was the Divas, or challenging for the Divas. No, she was the Divas champion. She was defending it against Summer Rae in one of the worst matches in the series, just because I put no thought or effort into it. So that's my fault, not the fault of the competitors. But in this match, Nikki shows up, and this obviously is then going to build into Paige versus Nikki versus Natalya at Night of Champions for the Divas title. We've gotten Emma and Tamina out of the picture now, so that kind of concludes that. Paige defends her title here. It's a good match, I guess, but doesn't really have much of an impression, doesn't leave much of a mark. It was merely serviceable for giving Paige an actual title defense for once. Like, come to think of it, the last title defense the last time the title was defended was at Extreme Rules when Paige defeated Brie. Because, she won. No, I'm thinking Over the Limit. Because Paige won it at Extreme Rules, defeated Brie in a rematch at Over the Limit. Then Tamina won it at Payback. Paige won it at Money in the Bank. And she retained here. So yeah, the first time since Over the Limit, her match with Brie Bella, that she actually had a title defense. It would have been so much better if she had, like, not lost it to Tamina at Payback. Not lost it to Tamina at Payback. And instead, held it up till this point. And then maybe lost it at Night of Champions. Because then at least she would have had a decent title reign. But no, instead she's a two-time champ. And neither really leaves a mark. And that obviously was not brand exclusive because the women weren't really brand exclusive at the time. And that's the thing about the women now is that I thought of making them brand exclusive, but I'm just going to do away with that idea now because, like, there's not enough going on. People have said, like, oh, you could bring in a second women's title, but I need to actually establish the division first. So doing the brand split is not helping me with that because I only have a small selection of matches to put together. So I'm just going to do away with that and pretend that brand exclusivity was never a thing in my universe mode for the women. At least, like, nowadays, it's basically just going to be they can show up whenever, wherever. So, yeah. I think that's kind of what I was doing back then. They might have been assigned to a roster because you have to do that in-game, but I'm pretty sure they would show up wherever. So I'm gonna go back to doing that style because it makes more sense. At least until I can establish a division, establish several names, not just Asuka and, I don't know, the Bellas were there before, Natalya was there, building up Alexa Bliss kind of. Like, I need to actually have 3 or 4 good women who, like, have been established. We know, okay, these are the top dogs in the division. Then we work on it from there. But again, getting a little off track. Then I'm a little confused with the card order. It might have been Roman Reigns versus Bray Wyatt next, but I'm gonna say it was the United States Championship Scramble Open Challenge. So Cesaro is, this was his way of one-upping Titus O'Neil's 2 out of 3 falls match. It's a championship scramble. This match was, very interesting to put together, to edit, especially considering that it was on my older laptop where everything was just slower, especially the rendering. God, the old rendering times were nightmarish. But Survivor Series was the last show I made on that old laptop, and now I have a new one that goes faster, so it's good. But this was obviously the Championship Scramble. I had to throw it completely together from scratch, just a series of singles matches, triple threats, basically whatever I could put together. But you have Cesaro coming out first, obviously. He's the champion, issuing the challenge. Then Finn Balor comes out. He makes his debut. No, wait. Yes, Finn Balor came out. And the reason why I had him come out first was obviously because of his entrance. Finn Balor's entrance is very special, even though he wasn't bringing the demon, because it was way too soon to bring out the demon, not on his debut. That kind of kills it. You have to give some build-up to it. So Finn Balor has a really long entrance, so I decided to have him come out here. Have him come out to fight Cesaro first thing, right off the bat. So that happens. They scuffle for a bit. I don't think there was a fall in this point. No, no. There might have... I don't remember if there was or not. But at some point, I think Balor gets a fall in this championship scramble, but I don't think it was here. No, wait. He did. He got a fall. And then I think when Itami comes out, because then Hideo Itami makes his debut, he comes out third. But then Cesaro, I think, makes him tap out in the sharpshooter. So Cesaro takes it back. And then Sami Zayn comes out at fourth. No, I don't think there were any other falls after that. Because for some reason I want to say that maybe Balor got a fall on Sami Zayn. Or that Itami got the first fall and not Balor, and then Balor got one here. But I think they were just false finishes. I don't think anything else happened there. So Sami Zayn, he's fourth. And then when it's... Because we had the two debuts between Balor and Itami. And then we have Sami Zayn come out, who's another big name, an up-and-coming star. So all these credible superstars. And then you wonder, well, how could we top that with a fifth entry? There's 5 minutes left. Do you want to try to build another super credible guy? Try to get a guy some falls in there and really string out the tension? But I thought this match was already kind of packed enough with like future stars with talent. So instead, I decided to go with a bit of a gag entry. At number 5, it was Heath Slater. He comes out and he comes out and Sami Zayn takes him out. Then you get some exchanges with Balor and Itami, and Cesaro's in there too. Sami Zayn doing stuff. So they kind of take each other out. Comes down to the wire. Cesaro takes out Slater again. And I think there was a potential false finish coming down to the wire with, who was it? Who was left in the ring? I don't know. Might have been Balor. I think Balor hit a Bloody Sunday on somebody. Might have been Sami Zayn. And then was going for the pin, but time expired. I think. That might have been how the match ended. But either way, Cesaro retains. He defends his title in the championship scramble. Some people said it was a little convenient that he would come out on top. And I do kind of agree. The way that I brought in 2 new debuts and also Sami Zayn, who had got quite a bit of build-up at this point. But then to have Cesaro retain, maybe it was a little forced. Maybe it didn't have to be a championship scramble. Maybe I could have done something else instead. Because to have a championship scramble but have the champion retain at the end of the day could be seen as a little underwhelming. But obviously, I wasn't going to have Cesaro lose the title here because now I was setting up the match with Titus ONeil at Night of Champions. So why would I have him lose here? That doesn't make much sense. And I mean, yeah, Cesaro could have... No, not really, because Cesaro's on Raw, Titus is on SmackDown, so I don't know how I would have justified Intercontinental title match for Cesaro. I could have done an open challenge on main event, have Titus challenge a Raw superstar, but it seems a little boring. I like the title versus title match better, especially knowing that it main evented Night of Champions, which is a pay-per-view defined by title matches. I think it was a good climax to that show. And I thought it was a good, small little rivalry I put together there. So yeah, I think Cesaro winning was the right call here. This was definitely a contender for Match of the Year in the Slammy Awards. I don't think it won. Let me double check, because I'm not 100% sure. No, it did not win Match of the Year, but it was definitely a strong contender. However, it did win the Open Challenge of the Year, which I think was basically my way of kind of having another Match of the Year Slammy in there. Because at this point now, I had been putting on so many... Because when my production style changed, I really started knocking things out of the park, I feel. It seemed like the pay-per-views at this point were... I continued to one-up myself for a good while there. Because there was... Payback had done better than Over the Limit and Extreme Rules by far. And then Money in the Bank took it a step further. SummerSlam took it a step further. Night of Champions was... obviously, because once you come off of SummerSlam, the build-up isn't gonna be there. It just won't. But... Night of Champions and Battleground and King of the Ring, production-wise, were also really good. And then Survivor Series took it, because obviously, the match that beat the Open Challenge Championship Scramble in the polls was the 5-on-5 Survivor Series Tag Team matchup, which that also took a hell of a lot of editing effort put into it. So, those were the two standouts from 2K16. I think it's safe to say that the Championship Scramble was Match of the Night on this card. It was really meant to be. It was the show stealer. It was the match. I mean, because also just the fact that I put so much editing into it, I think was also going to impress a lot of people. It was going to be very tough to overcome that with any other more standard matchup. So yeah, I would say this was the match of the night. It's a big point in favor of Monday Night Raw. It might not have been perfect, because yeah, bringing in all the new debuts and then not having anybody win the title, not having the title change, might have been a little underwhelming, but I still think it was a really great match, well put together, and it was a good step in the good forward step for Cesaro's career, especially going into the title versus title match with Titus, which, like I said, this was meant to set up. Then we'll do the Roman Reigns versus Bray Wyatt singles matchup. This one, this one, compared to everything else on the card, it's a little forgettable just because it gets kind of lost in the shuffle. The matchup wasn't bad, I would say. However, the one issue with it was that it was meant to be a no-holds-barred match because obviously I had the Wyatt family interfere. That was my plan for the matchup all along. The issue was that I forgot to advertise it as such, so going into it, it seems like it's just a normal one-on-one matchup, and I might have briefly mentioned it somewhere in the SummerSlam show, but in the build-up to SummerSlam, I completely forgot to do it. So there was a little confusion when the Wyatt family came down to the ring, and first of all, Roman Reigns spears Luke Harper off the apron, so that's not too fishy, because obviously Harper never got a strike in. But then Eric Rowan's in the ring, and he's beating down Roman Reigns, and it's like, shouldn't that be a disqualification? Shouldn't Bray have lost here? But the matchup, it was just a poorly advertised no-holds-barred match, so that kind of took away from it a bit. Otherwise, this matchup wasn't bad. It was just, like I said, lost in the shuffle. There was a lot of other big moments, big matches happening around this match, so it just kind of gets overlooked a bit. The build-up was a little last minute because Bray Wyatt shows up at Money in the Bank and costs Roman Reigns the ladder match, which also at the time was kind of copying from what WWE did, having Bray Wyatt attack Roman Reigns during the Money in the Bank. I think that's something they did. But at the time, I wasn't a big fan of WWE, so I don't know if this was directly inspired from it. I do think there was a connection there, definitely, but maybe I only did it just to kind of to show that I could do it better, have a better feud result from it. Because obviously, with Bray Wyatt, I've been building him as an actual threat and not just as some forgettable, person on the side of the road or in the locker room or whatever. And as for Roman Reigns, he's different in my series too. He's not the unstoppable dude who's also an underdog somehow. Here in in my series, he is, I wouldn't say he's an underdog, but he just has really bad fortune, really bad luck, you could say. Because he doesn't win a lot of matches. That's the thing. I don't view him as an underdog, but he doesn't win a lot of matches either. So it's not like I haven't forced him down anybody's throats like WWE has. But also, I still view him as a face, and that's what I've been building him as a babyface, which some people will never agree with just because of what WWE has conditioned its audience to feel, how it has conditioned the audience to feel about Roman Reigns. And there are people who won't like Roman Reigns no matter what you do with him. It doesn't matter if he's a heel, if he's a face. People will say, yeah, you should make him a heel because he'd be more interesting that way. But that doesn't really fix the issue, because then at that point, you're not supposed to like heels. So, also turning him heel doesn't fix anything in his character necessarily. But ultimately, it comes down to what I want to do with the people. This is my creative vision. I want to do what I think the superstar would fit best in with my vision. And in this instance, with stuff going on with Ambrose and Seth Rollins, I wanted Roman Reigns to continue the legacy of the Shield, as a face. Not, never step out of the shadow of the Shield, because I do have him do other things, but the thing with Roman Reigns is that, Ambrose is a face, at the time, Ambrose was a face, Rollins was a heel, Roman Reigns was also a face. He was drafted to SmackDown. He had just come off of a victory over the Wyatt family in a 6-man tag at WrestleMania. So he was a good guy. He's a guy you're supposed to cheer. And that never changes. I don't try to book him in a way that, he would be an obnoxious face where he wins all the matches all the time. Which, I don't know, there are some people who do win. For a guy like Nakamura, who really his only loss had an asterisk attached to it. He wins, he's undefeated in my series to this point. Well, yeah. But then, if people don't complain about Nakamura being undefeated. Or with Kevin Owens. Kevin Owens has only lost one match that was to Cesaro, the World Heavyweight Champion. But other than that, for, ever since his debut back at Battleground, Kevin Owens has been undefeated. And some people have kind of complained a bit that maybe his title reign's getting a little bit stale because it's been going on for so long, but the thing about Kevin Owens is that's, like, I deliberately built him up to be a monster, and he's not a guy you're supposed to cheer for. What I've been taking. I don't know, that's another bit of a tangent I can talk about more later on, or just in some other video entirely. But, Roman Reigns, he loses here, Bray Wyatt gets the win, and at this point, because before Bray Wyatt had been, like, my build-up with him was very lackluster, because obviously he was in the King of the Ring in 2K14, which is weird. He had a mini feud with Cesaro, which was stupid. It just shouldn't have happened. I mean, like, he comes in and loses, which was dumb. Then he disappears until the Royal Rumble, and he comes back, builds up to a match at WrestleMania against The Shield, which the Wyatt family also loses. At least in Harper and Rowan's defense, they were the tag team champions, and they had the longest tag team title reign in the series to date. But with Bray Wyatt, he doesn't have that. He's just the guy. He's the leader, but he doesn't do anything, really. So this was my step to... I was working to correct that. He actually comes in and defeats Roman Reigns, and from this point forward, Bray Wyatt, he gets a credible build-up. Because from this point, he does kind of disappear for a bit. No, he doesn't. Because he gets involved with John Cena next. Then he takes down John Cena at Survivor Series, which leads to his match with Sting, which he'll take down Sting, and then, of course, now I'm back to the thing in 2K18 where he's going up against Dean Ambrose and Roman Reigns again. So, Bray Wyatt, like, he's getting a good build-up, and it all starts here. Problem is just the match gets a little lost in the shuffle. I don't think there's anything really bad about it necessarily. It just isn't as good as some of the other stuff surrounding it. That was, of course, a SmackDown match. Then we have the tag team title match between the Ascension and the New Day. Now, for the Ascension, who were pretty dominant tag team, their time as tag team champions was pretty solid for the most part. This matchup, well, I mean, like, a lot of their matches were just kind of forgettable. Like, obviously they come in and they beat the Wyatt family, so they're looking pretty strong. Then they defeat the Usos on back-to-back pay-per-views, which is a little underwhelming. Then they take on the New Day here, which was fine, I guess, but it's also not a very memorable tag team match. Stardust comes out and distracts the New Day, which obviously will... Basically, I used the New Day to build up Stardust. He comes out here and distracts Xavier Woods, so that gets rid of the numbers advantage, Woods not being at ringside now, and then the Ascension takes him out with the Fall of Man. Simple stuff. The Ascension retains. New Day then go on to a program with Stardust. So that's a way to also kind of play up the bizarreness of Stardust while also making him not look like a joke. Because, yeah, he might be kind of he's a comedic character a little bit, but also it's Cody Rhodes, and Cody Rhodes was a pretty big deal in my series to this point. He might not have won the Intercontinental title yet, but, like, there was a clear direction with his character. Just the thing with Stardust, it was a step in it was a bit of a detour, but it would eventually get him to what he needed to do, which was how I wrote the Stardust character, was that he changes up his style, and that throws people off, and it helps him get to the Intercontinental Championship, which is, I mean, obviously then the stuff, well, again, I'll talk about the story with Stardust once I get into Survivor Series. So that was a SmackDown thing, and like, it's not really a point in their favor, but I guess it also wasn't terrible. It was a way to keep things going. It set up a new feud with Stardust and New Day, and the Ascension takes down another challenger. So it was all right, but it was a fairly standard match. Then we have Dean Ambrose versus Seth. No, wait, or was it the world title match first? No, I'm gonna say it was Dean Ambrose versus Seth Rollins. This happens. A pretty good match, all things considered. It does end with Kane coming down, and he hits Ambrose with a choke slam, and then Seth Rollins takes advantage. So that did happen. But I mean, it wasn't... I'm okay with it because it was a way to... Because at this point, then, I start building up Team Rollins. So, introducing Kane there, he's the director of operations, so that he kind of is in Seth Rollins' back pocket. He helps give Seth more opportunities. It eventually leads him to a World Heavyweight title match at Fastlane. So, it was a way to also stack the deck against Dean Ambrose. Seth Rollins has Kane in his corner, behind the scenes, like, management-wise, and then, of course, later on, he's going to form an actual army. He's going to bring in Big Show, Blake and Murphy. So, bringing in Kane, it was kind of the first step in that direction. Also, with Kane being corporate, I didn't want to get a created wrestler with Kane, with masked Kane, so I found a way to use corporate Kane. Am I a little lazy for doing that? Yes, I will not deny that. That was basically the only reason. Well, not the only reason, but it was one of the main reasons, was that I didn't want to get a created wrestler for Kane, so I had him be corporate for a good while, and then as soon as the corporate thing went away, he went back to the mask. He left Team Rollins, but it all kind of worked out. I don't think it felt contrived in any way, because Seth Rollins was kind of restructuring Team Rollins by that point, so when Kane leaves, it makes sense, because, I mean, he had cast out Big Show, he casts out, he didn't cast out Blake and Murphy yet, but Kane goes next, but Kane leaves of his own accord, because he sees what happens with Big Show, and he's like, yeah, I'm not going to let you do that for me. I'm tired of playing in your back pocket. And also Triple H returns, which kind of gives Kane an extra motivation to turn against Seth Rollins, because Triple H kind of commands him to bring back, not commands him, but pressures him to bring back the demon, like he kind of pushes him in that direction. So, yeah, I think the thing with Kane, it was maybe not the I don't know, I don't really have any big problems with it. It wasn't like Kane was a major player in the series, that this really was a groundbreaking mistake or anything. I think it was good. It served the purpose it needed to, and when it was done, it was done. Didn't drag on any longer than it needed to. So even though, yes, there's a bit of laziness behind it, because I just didn't want to have masked Kane, I still think I made it work in the context of the story. So as long as I can do that, I don't think the laziness is a big deal on my part. Like, I've talked about, like, arenas, but, like, changing the arenas doesn't really affect the stories I'm going to create, so I don't see a big reason for doing so. And I kind of view the same with attire changes. It's just kind of an added flair, I guess. But yeah, Seth Rollins wins in this matchup. Dean Ambrose looks good, but because Kane comes in, it also is maybe not a bit of a cop-out in a way, I guess it kind of is, but it gives a way for Seth to get the win. Seth doesn't necessarily look weak, because he did put up a hell of a fight against Ambrose. It was very back and forth. It was just that as soon as Ambrose was starting to get the upper hand, that's when Kane comes in and takes him out with a chokeslam. And I think maybe even a tombstone on top of that. So Ambrose looks strong. Seth Rollins looks strong as well. But the thing about like how this could make a champion look weak, and I think this is where WWE made the mistake, is that if you keep winning by interference, like if you never back anything up on your own, that's when it's an issue. But I made sure to hammer that home in the Night of Champions match, that Seth Rollins, I'll get to Night of Champions then, but Seth wins on his own. Like, it's a steel cage. No one gets involved, and that's what the steel cage is supposed to do. It's supposed to keep people out of the match. WWE doesn't seem to get that, but I at least used it correctly. No one gets involved. Team Rollins or Kane, really at this point, I think it was only Kane. He doesn't get involved in the match, so Seth fights Dean, and he beats him of his own accord. So having Seth get the cheap win here, it's a way to keep building him up as a heel, but he doesn't look weak because of it, because he can back up what he does. And that's what I've always been careful to emphasize with Seth, was that even though he has a lot of help, he has a lot of people, it's like with Triple H and Evolution. Triple H can stand behind Evolution and have them fight his battles as much as he wants, but you know that when Triple H is stepping into the ring, he means business. It's game time. And I try to do the same with Seth Rollins and Team Rollins. He has a bunch of henchmen who can fight his battles, but at the end of the day, if you're going to fight him, he will fight you, and he will take you to the limit. Like, you really have to fight this guy. He's talented. So I was extra careful to ensure that detail. But here, I needed, like, Seth has to kind of escape. I don't want Ambrose to lose clean right off the bat. So yeah, Kane comes in. It's a good match. I think it's more memorable than the Reigns Wyatt thing, I feel. The only real spot I remember of that match was obviously the finish, the Sister Abigail, Wyatt kicking out of a spear, and obviously Reigns spearing Harper off the apron. That was the big money shot there. With this matchup, you have Ambrose diving to the outside. You have the missed Phoenix Splash. You have, I think, a Dirty Deeds kick out. Maybe that was in there. But yeah, a lot of, like, I don't think there weren't any, like, big, I mean, there might have been. I think there might have been a pedigree kick out in there. No, there wasn't. Because Kane hits a chokeslam, then Seth comes in and hits a pedigree. That's the end of the match. So, it's, like, one of my trademarks is to try to protect finishers, not have people kick out of them left and right. So this matchup, I was careful to not, like, abuse that. And that was, like, a big issue I had with my WrestleMania Iron Man match, was that it's just kick out of finishers left and right. What I could have done to improve, well, I'll talk about that. Talk about the Iron Man match when I get to 2K17, when I get to WrestleMania. But that was that match for Raw. Then we have the World Heavyweight Championship match between Dolph Ziggler and Ryback. This one was pretty predictable, honestly. Ziggler had just come off of the TLC match with Edge where he retained the title but landed right on his neck. So he was injured, basically. He stood no chance of defending against Ryback. And the big plan was always for Ryback to come in and win the World Heavyweight title. I have been building to it since he came over to Raw after his loss to Titus at Extreme Rules. So Ryback comes in, basically just destroys Ziggler. Ziggler puts up a bit of a fight, but for the most part, it's Ryback. He wins. He finally captures the World Heavyweight title that I've been building to for ages at this point. So Ryback finally gets the title. It was a good match. Not like it wasn't a back and forth spectacle, but it wasn't supposed to be because Ziggler's injured. So if Dolph Ziggler comes in against a very physical competitor like Ryback, like I know that it's kind of a joke that Ryback is a really stiff worker, and I mean CM Punk has said it that like he really goes out there and hurts people at times. But the thing about like I kind of played into that a bit because Ziggler is already hurt, he's already injured, and since Ryback is such a powerhouse, like it wouldn't make sense for Ziggler to take a lot of these shots and be all right because not only is Ryback a powerhouse, but Ziggler himself is handicapped with his injury. So I mean he shouldn't put up a huge fight. So, and he doesn't. This matchup is mainly one-sided. I think there's a zigzag in there, a kick out. But, yeah, Ryback hits him with the shell shock. It's done. Game over. New World Heavyweight Champion. So, it's a good closer for Raw, but also it was never going to steal the show. It just wasn't meant to be that kind of a match. And then, finally, there's the main event, the WWE title, where Daniel Bryan was set to cash in his Money in the Bank and challenge CM Punk, finally putting their feud to a close. Finally getting that one-on-one match. But it doesn't happen, of course. Brock Lesnar takes out Daniel Bryan backstage, steals Money in the Bank briefcase, cashes in, and at the end of it, Brock Lesnar is your WWE champion. The match was a pretty good closer for the show, especially like the shock, like the big shock in that gut punch of like Lesnar steals the briefcase. Lesnar is challenging for the WWE title now. Like it comes out of left field, you don't see it coming. And then also, like, it was a way to bring Lesnar back into the series, because at this point, Lesnar, he had fought Bryan at WrestleMania and lost, and then he just disappeared for a good while. This was the first time he actually came back, the first time he made an appearance since that matchup. And it also makes sense that Lesnar would look for retribution against Daniel Bryan, because obviously Bryan beat him at WrestleMania on the big stage. So Lesnar takes him out, and then he goes back after CM Punk. The two had they had history in WWE 13, which I guess wasn't the strongest, but there was a bit of a connection there, so Brock Lesnar coming, and mainly it was just, CM Punk was the champion, he was just an obstacle, so Brock Lesnar comes in, takes him out after taking Bryan out. This obviously was a way to put Punk on the shelf because he wasn't in 2K16, this match was also 2K15 footage, so Lesnar wasn't in Punk wasn't in 2K16, and I wanted to wait to get a good created wrestler of him, so, I don't know, I wasn't entirely sure, I guess, what was going to happen with his career. I thought maybe I was just going to write him out entire. No, I never had that thought. I was always going to be building up to Punk Bryan. It was just the matter of how I was going to get there changed around a bit. But yeah, Punk goes out with an injury, Bryan goes out with an injury. That's kind of my way of keeping, not getting a created wrestler for CM Punk. I had thought about maybe bringing him back at Survivor Series at one point to take on Lesnar for the title, but obviously that never happened. I believe I covered that in a Pretend It Never Happened episode. So Lesnar comes in, wins the title, and it's a shocking end to SummerSlam. I think it was really strong, definitely a strong conclusion for SmackDown. It completely reshaped what the main event of SmackDown would be, and in a way, it really brought to light the flaws, or rather the lack of star power in that top division, because up to this point, we had been building up Sheamus, Barrett, and Roman Reigns. Well, Roman Reigns has just lost to Bray Wyatt. I'm not going to put Bray Wyatt in the title picture because one win isn't enough to do that. Sheamus and Barrett had lost twice, including the Fatal 4-Way. So they were obviously done. They weren't going to be getting back in the title picture anytime soon. So who was left? Well, you have John Cena, who had a match of the year candidate with CM Punk at Money in the Bank. And that's it. There's no one else. There really was no one else. I would bring Roman Reigns back up later, but that was because I had nobody else. I hadn't been developing any new main event top-level stars. So, yeah, bringing in Brock Lesnar having him take out Punk and Bryan really brought to the forefront the issues I had with SmackDown. And if I hadn't done that, maybe it would have persisted. Because then, like, you could have had a back and forth with Punk and Bryan, maybe, but there was no one really in there to usurp that position. So, bringing Lesnar in, it definitely made the SmackDown main event scene kind of barren for a while. But that was, I think, important, because then I was able to build up new stars. Because, I mean, it brought that to the forefront. Like, oh, hey, I don't know who's going to challenge for Lesnar's title next. Maybe I should build some new top stars. Maybe that's a good idea. So, all in all, I think, I mean, both shows had a pretty solid performance on SummerSlam, but I'd have to give an advantage to Raw here, just because the stuff with Ambrose and Seth Rollins was pretty critical to the series moving forward. You do have Rollins pulling double duty, which is a little repetitive, but, I mean, the matches were good. Rollins builds himself up with 2 victories in one night. That was mainly the big appeal of having him pull double duty, was that it'd make him look even stronger, because that was another thing. I talked about Kane interfering in the Ambrose match. Seth had already fought once in the night, so Seth wasn't really at 100%. So having the interference there, it does, like, he's already won a match in that night, and he's put up a pretty good fight here against Ambrose. So having Kane come in, it prevents Ambrose from looking weak by having Seth beat Shane, and then also go on to defeat Ambrose clean, because then where would Ambrose have gone from there? Like, now he doesn't even seem like a legitimate threat to Rollins. So yeah, the double duty kind of helps build up Seth. Cesaro, obviously the championship scramble was nearly the match of the year, definitely match of the night. A lot of editing went into it, so of course I'm gonna have a strong personal attachment to that one. And then Ziggler versus Ryback might not have been as strong as Punk versus Lesnar, like as far as star power goes and as far as match quality goes, but it served the purpose it needed to. It was good. Whereas, like, SmackDown, I mean, like, there's a lot of, like, building to things here. Neville and Graves there wasn't really much of an end game there. It was just, I had to get rid of Corey Graves. I had to write him off, so Neville took him out here. So that wrapped up that plot thread. Titus versus Darren was really good, obviously, continuing to build towards the title versus title match. Bray Wyatt versus Reigns did what it needed to do, but it was also a little underwhelming. The tag title match did build towards New Day and Stardust, that rivalry, but that was a fairly minor thing, and the Ascension doesn't really have anywhere to go after this. They just fight another team of challengers, so it's not the greatest match. And then Punk Lesnar was good, but at the same time it does bring to light the flaws I have with the main event scene and SmackDown at this stage in the game. So, I mean, it was good. Like, the match, it was a good closer, but at the same time, I just think Raw had a stronger overall performance with, like, a cohesive lineup as a whole. And obviously, SummerSlam is the best pay-per-view to date. It clearly eclipses Money in the Bank. Like, obviously, you have the 2 out of 3 falls Intercontinental title match and the Championship Scramble Open Challenge. Those were 2 matches that kind of went more into the editing, especially the Championship Scramble, where I had to time everything. It was a really interesting process and a very, it was a good experiment. It was something I hadn't ever done before. It was a little sloppy in places, I will admit, but just to give something like that a shot, I think it worked out in the end. It really impressed a lot of people, and I'm happy with how it turned out. Yeah, it could have been a little more polished, but it was my first attempt at such a thing. So it's something to learn from, and then if I ever do another Championship Scramble in the future, I know where, like, the issues are, how I can improve, what I should cut, and what I could add in. Maybe more false finishes, or not false finishes, but maybe more title changes in the scramble itself. Who knows? But Money in the Bank really can't measure up. Like, the ladder match, or the Money in the Bank ladder match, rather, that had some good editing in it. Like, that was very editing intensive. But, I mean, everything else, not to say that Money in the Bank was bad, it's just SummerSlam did it better. Especially then you have the 2 matches that were pretty editing intensive. The 2 out of 3 falls, which was really, I just had to string together a couple of singles matches and just tie them all together. So that was not as groundbreaking, but the Championship Scramble was way more complicated than what the Money in the Bank ladder match was. So from a technical standpoint, SummerSlam eclipses Money in the Bank. We're getting a little more polished and also putting in more unique ideas with the Championship Scramble. And then just, I think as far as the booking goes, this was a big payoff for most of the rivalries. So, of course, it's going to surpass Money in the Bank. Then we move into Night of Champions, which does take a bit of a step back compared to SummerSlam. We open up the show with a Divas Championship triple threat match, the final match of the Divas division before it was disbanded and later brought back as the women's division. But this is between Paige, Natalya, and Nikki Bella. The matchup, I opened the show, gave the Divas the spotlight, but, what really can I say about this match? It was the last of the Divas division, so nothing was going to come out of it storyline-wise. Nikki Bella wins here, which, the title changes, but it doesn't do much. Obviously she can't defend it, because the division is done. So, yeah, congratulations, you won the title. And, of course, it does play into the Queen of the Ring tournament a bit, because she gets to kind of advance past the first round because she was a former champion. She doesn't just get a rematch, but there is a bit of a perk to being the former Divas champion. But, there wasn't really not much to say about this match. It was good. It was, technically speaking, it was a good match. But storyline-wise, there's just not much to say about it. And it's not brand exclusive, so it doesn't really work in favor or against any of the shows. It's just there. Then we have a World Heavyweight Championship #1 contenders match representing Monday Night Raw. It is Rusev taking on the newly acquired Randy Orton. Now, Randy Orton was on SmackDown for a good while, not really doing anything. I think the last appearance I can remember from him was the WWE Draft when he fought John Cena in a loss. After that, he might have had a match with CM Punk, a singles match somewhere, but Randy had disappeared completely. He had his world title match at Royal Rumble, and that was it. I don't even think he wasn't even in the Elimination Chamber. So Orton just straight up disappeared. There was nothing for him on SmackDown. So I traded some people away and brought Orton to Raw and really tried to revive his career, and that's exactly what I did. This is where people say, oh, you were... people who complain that, I was burying Randy Orton by, having him lose to Ryback and then lose to Samoa Joe back-to-back pay-per-views have no idea what burying Randy Orton was like. If you want to accuse me of burying Randy Orton, that's basically what I did in 2K15, because he's not even on screen. He's not even doing anything. So, that happens. Randy Orton gets to fight Rusev here in a #1 contenders match. His career is he gets re-energized, so he does go in and defeat Rusev, which I think was good, because Rusev wasn't quite ready yet for a title match. Prior to this, there had been a triple threat #1 contenders match to determine who would fight Ryback at Night of Champions, because Dolph Ziggler was out with an injury. He wouldn't come back until several months later, so somebody had to fight Ryback. It was going to be either Rusev, Orton, or Edge. Obviously, Edge won that triple threat, and Edge would get the title shot. So this was a way to keep building towards the next challenger. Rusev and Orton, they both still look strong, both have good performances, but I gave it to the veteran Randy, because if I was going to bring him back and revive his career and start that off by having him lose to Rusev in his first pay-per-view match, doesn't look too good. Does not look good at all. So Orton wins here. Rusev could afford the loss, and this will eventually build towards Rusev's eventual face turn, which he's still a face in my series right now, so it's stuck for a while, and this was kind of building into that. Then we have SmackDown's completely forgettable Tag Team Championship match between the Ascension and the team of Tyson Kidd and Jack Swagger. Yeah, there's not much to say about this match. Kidd and Swagger won a #1 contenders match, got the title shot, and they lost. It was completely forgettable. Better than, or not better. It was worse than the New Day thing, because at least New Day had something going out of it. Here, Kidd and Swagger just show up and lose. They're just contenders, challengers to get knocked down and make the Ascension look good. No real significance out of it. So, yeah, just kind of happens. Tyson Kidd and Jack Swagger don't really go anywhere from here. This is the only tag team title match they're going to get. And yeah, their partnership was really underwhelming. They don't do a whole lot until they eventually split up, leading to a match at the Slammy Awards, which was months down the road. There just was nothing for Kidd and Swagger. They were just one of those teams to put over other teams, and in this was the best that they got. They got to put over the champs. Then we had a 6-man tag team match. It was New Day versus Stardust, Wade Barrett, and Sheamus. Now, this was obviously going to continue from Stardust's little interference at SummerSlam. He had cost the New Day the tag team title match against the Ascension. In a way, like, he took out Xavier Woods, so it was a fair 2-on-2 match. And then Stardust had to find some allies to take on New Day in a 6-man tag. Up until this point, Stardust had been playing all sorts of shenanigans just to ruin New Day's matches. He had defeated a couple members of the New Day. I think he beat Xavier and Big E. I don't think he ever fought Kofi one-on-one. But Stardust had just been completely thwarting the New Day at every turn. So then it's 3-on-1, so Stardust has to find some allies. And he calls upon Wade Barrett and Sheamus, which this matchup served a couple of purposes for them. Bringing them back, obviously they get a win on a pay-per-view, which is a good way to get them back into relevance after they had... Because really the last relevant thing they had done was challenge for the WWE title at Payback in the Fatal 4-Way. So they come back here, and this also builds towards their tag team run. They don't ever win a title, but I mean, Barrett and Sheamus, like, there was a good alliance here that I would have ran with for quite a while. Unfortunately, Barrett would be released from the company shortly after this, so Barrett's time in Universe Mode came to an end. I was a big Barrett fan, honestly, and I would have loved to give him the world title at some point, but really the time for that had passed by this point. So, I mean, there was a potential that they could have gone for the tag titles, but unfortunately just didn't have the time to really get them there. They really just kind of put over other teams, mostly. More so in the Fastlane Gauntlet. That was the biggest, like the closest they got to a tag title match was that number one contenders gauntlet. So they did that. Barrett and Sheamus, they team up with Stardust and get the win here. Because really with New Day, I really haven't done much with New Day at all in the series. Like, I just haven't had much of a plan for them. They had been a tag team by this point, because they formed together back in January when they took on... No, February. Because they took... No. It was right at the beginning of 2K15 that the New Day started working together. So they had been around since January, never really doing much. They got the tag title match at SummerSlam, so they finally overcame their struggles to get a title shot. But that was the end of it. They lost, and then they dropped down here, and they... I needed them to put over Stardust, because... I wanted to build Stardust towards the Intercontinental title because that was Cody's objective all along. So, bringing in the New Day, who was like a 3-man faction, and having Stardust almost take them out single-handedly up until this match, where then it's 3-on-1 for real. So, Stardust had to find some allies. Really, the whole goal was just to put over Stardust. I wanted to put extra emphasis on that, just because Stardust was such a goofy gimmick. It's very hard to take seriously in some instances, especially knowing how WWE would book him. He was really just a comedy relief character. Whereas here, I wanted Stardust to be credible, because I wanted Cody to be credible. So I maybe put a little extra on making him look good, having him take down New Day basically by himself until the 6-man tag match happens, where... because it's 3-on-1, he gets the allies to really make sure that he gets the job done, and he gets the job done. Barrett and Sheamus get their own moments, taking out members of the New Day on the outside. So all 3 men get the opportunity to shine. New Day is really just the butt of the joke in this instance. They take the loss and disappear. Well, they don't necessarily disappear, but from relevance, they don't really do a whole lot until they get their other tag title match at Fastlane, which we'll get to that later on. So this matchup was good. It built Barrett and Sheamus, brought them back into the picture, and then Stardust continues to build up towards a future Intercontinental title match. So it did what it had to do. It's a 6-man tag, so technically speaking, it wasn't the greatest, because just tag team mechanics in the video games are terrible, at least until they fix them. So yeah, it was good for what it needed to be. No real issues with it. Then we jump back over to Monday Night Raw for the World Heavyweight Championship match between Ryback and Edge. Or maybe, I don't know, the WWE title match might have come before this, but I'm just going to say Ryback versus Edge. This matchup was, it was another one of those champion takes on a challenger who won a number one contenders match. Obviously, Edge had a pretty long-standing history with Dolph Ziggler. He had already had a shot at the world title at Payback and Money in the Bank. So he disappeared out of the picture for a little bit, but he's still Edge. He's still pretty famous legend, a WWE legend. So, I mean, Edge, he had the reputation there, and he hadn't really performed poorly because he was still at the top of the card when he fought Ziggler. Even though he lost, he was still way up there. And now that the title had changed hands, Edge and Christian could finally get another shot at the gold. Christian kind of gets overlooked here because, I mean, he had been beaten by Ryback at Money in the Bank, so there was no real, like, he didn't have a reason to be in that triple threat to make it a fatal four-way. The number one contenders match between Rusev and Orton and Edge. There was no real reason to put Christian in there. And that does come up later in storyline continuity, so it was very much intentional that Christian was not there. But Edge comes in, he wins that triple threat, goes on to face Ryback here, and obviously the purpose was just to put Ryback over, because he just won the title. He's not going to lose it. Someone has to put him over. Someone has to make him look good. So Edge comes in, and he does that. He loses to Ryback, gets beaten with a shell shocked, and yeah, that's... I think Ryback might have kicked out of a top rope spear, possibly. I think he might have kicked out of at least a spear. Because that was, like, for certain guys like Ryback, who I do build up as, in a way, monsters, having them kick out of a finisher makes it more believable because they are these big dudes, and, like, they're supposed to be the top of the card. So, like, in the main event, especially, I think having people kick out of finishers is more acceptable, especially on a pay-per-view, because it's a high-intensity match. The scale is there, and it's like the top of the card. These are the best of the industry at the time. So you gotta prove that. Like, give a good reason as to why these guys are the top of the food chain, why this guy is the world champion. So he beats Edge. In the grand scheme of things, the matchup is kind of forgettable, but it did what it needed to do. It just, I guess, didn't do it exceedingly well. It was just kind of acceptable. So Ryback wins there. Not a bad match for Raw. It did what it needed to do. That's all it needed to do. That was kind of redundant. Then we have the WWE title match between Brock Lesnar and John Cena, and this suffers from the Edge problem, only John Cena didn't even win a number one contenders match. He honestly was just named as the contender by... I phrased it in a way like Lita named him as the number one contender because he had put in the most work. He was the most impressive in the past for SmackDown, so that's why she did it. But honestly, we all know the reason. There was nobody else who could challenge Lesnar for that title. Roman Reigns had just lost to Bray Wyatt, and he was the next closest guy. Sheamus and Barrett, they had the thing with New Day, and they weren't even credible enough to fight for the WWE title, so why would they have been there? Who else was gonna get the match? I maybe could have brought back a legend for a night to do that, but at the time I just didn't have that kind of booking prowess to make that work, and I don't think there were really any legends that I could have brought back that would have had the star power. Because, like, nowadays, or let me think, who came in 2K17? Like Goldberg, for instance. Goldberg, if you really wanted to, like Murph's YT13 did it. He brought back Goldberg for basically like a month stint, building into a title match with Rusev at SummerSlam. And after that, he was done. He was gone. So, like, you can do that. You can make that work based on their star power, but obviously not getting much longevity out of it. But, like, for a good transitional match, a way to really establish a guy, you can do that with a legend. And I think that's okay, just as long as, like, you don't rely on legends. Bringing them back for one-off appearances is fine. And he did that with The Rock as well. It worked. Like, it did what it needed to do. He put over Roman Reigns. He put over Rusev. The legends, they came in, made the guys look strong, and then they left. They didn't overstay their welcome, which is the mistake that WWE has made in the past, and just something that I'm not a huge fan of in universe mode. So when other people will rely more so on legends as opposed to the current day superstars and building up new talent, it's not my cup of tea, personally. But yeah, Lesnar beats Cena. It's even less, like, impressive than the Ryback Edge match. I guess the impressiveness of it is in the same way that Brock Lesnar versus John Cena at SummerSlam that one year was impressive, where Lesnar just squashes him. And that's basically what this matchup was. It was putting over Suplex City and all the stuff you need to make Brock Lesnar look like a beast. So, yeah, it served its purpose. It was just the build up to it was a little more lackluster than Ryback versus Edge, which sang a lot. Well, not saying a lot, because that would imply that the build up to Ryback versus Edge was very lackluster, but it was like, it was worse than serviceable, I guess. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And then, of course, you have the main event. Title versus title, champion versus champion. Cesaro, the United States champion, taking on Titus ONeil, the Intercontinental champion. Now, this was interesting. I almost talked about this earlier, but this is the real place to mention it. How this matchup almost never happened. It really was just an accident that it came together. I did what I did on that episode of Main Event was I just kind of wanted I thought it'd be cool if the two matches transitioned together and, like, you kind of had the champions cross paths. But at the time when I did that, I, like, didn't even really consider that this would eventually lead to not a world title match, but a title versus title match. Like, having the U.S. and Intercontinental champions actually fight and put their titles on the line against one another at a pay-per-view, let alone to main event a pay-per-view. So, for how unplanned the Cesaro versus Titus ONeil rivalry was, it was really good. I mean, really, like, the foundation of it was the only thing, like, the foundation was an accident, but from that point on, once I knew I was doing it, I think the execution was pretty strong. Like, what I did at SummerSlam, having each guy have a champion, an open challenge match for their titles, but try to one-up each other, it really did play into this. Like, it makes both guys look really strong, because they defeat all their challengers, and also, like, you get that one-upsmanship. So eventually, it's going to come to a head where the two guys fight each other, and that's what happens here at Night of Champions. And also, having it be the main event, nothing else could have topped it, really. Like, what am I going to do? Have Brock Lesnar versus John Cena as the main event? Boo. Am I going to have Ryback versus Edge as the main event? Lame. I just realized I completely skipped over Dean Ambrose versus Seth Rollins in the steel cage. I talked about that a little bit for SummerSlam. Seth Rollins goes in and defeats Ambrose clean in the steel cage, but obviously it's not completely squashing Ambrose because Rollins escapes the cage. He doesn't actually, like, pin Ambrose, he escapes. So, in a sense, like, it's still inconclusive. Rollins gets the win, and he doesn't have any outside interference to help him do so. Because, like, the worst thing I could have done was have some sort of outside interference in this match, and also have Rollins escape. Because then at that point, not only is he running away, but he's not even doing it under his own power. His opponent is distracted. At least, in this steel cage match, Rollins took out Ambrose on his own. He incapacitated Ambrose with his own moves and then escaped, rather than relying on someone else to do the dirty work to help him win the match. Then, after this match, because this match I would say is one of the best on the card, the only thing that tops it is the title versus title match that I will get back to. But then after the match, Blake and Murphy make their debut as these hooded figures. We don't know who they are when they first show up, but they take out Ambrose, hit him with that wheelbarrow codebreaker combination, or facebreaker rather, because the codebreaker is Jericho's variation, but the move is called the facebreaker. So wheelbarrow facebreaker combination, they take out Ambrose after the match, so that will obviously set up the match at Battleground, where Ambrose teams up with Sami Zayn to take on Blake and Murphy. And it makes having Blake and Murphy line up with Seth Rollins makes them look more credible, because right off the bat, they're like, I'm attaching them to someone you already know, and someone who has just come off of 3 huge pay-per-view victories in a row. So, having these guys work under Seth Rollins, it really elevates them immediately upon debuting, because you know that they're going to be a serious threat, because they're working with Seth Rollins. And Seth Rollins, he's one of the top guys on the show. And the issue that I really could have had with this matchup was, what if I had made Blake and Murphy interfere during the match? Then that would have made Rollins look weak, and it would have been a little contrived. But having it happen after the match, like, Rollins has escaped, he's thwarted Ambrose, but then just to add insult to injury, to really rub salt in the wound, Blake and Murphy show up out of nowhere and take him down. And the thing about this was, it wasn't like Seth Rollins recruited them intentionally, they just kind of showed up of their own accord and took out Ambrose of their own volition. They wanted to work with Seth Rollins, so they did something to impress him. They took out Ambrose right in front of him. So it wasn't that Rollins, like, brought them in, like this was all part of the plan, which it would have been a little weird, because, like, I mean, let's say that Ambrose did win the steel cage match, then I guess they could have come to Rollins' rescue and helped him out there. But like I said, Rollins needed to win the steel cage on his own power to show that, yes, he is still a formidable threat, even if, like, Kane interfered at SummerSlam. Rollins can still hold his own. So Rollins wins, and he leaves, but, like, to prevent Ambrose as well from, like, going after Rollins, which definitely could have happened, having these guys come out of nowhere that Seth doesn't even know about and take out Ambrose right in front of him, really show them what they can do, or show Rollins what they can do. It was a good way to really form together a Team Rollins, because it's like, yeah, Seth Rollins brought in Big Show, he brought in Kane, but Blake and Murphy, they joined willingly, like they wanted to be a part of this. So it's a bit more nuanced than just Seth Rollins hiring a bunch of people, which it works to kind of paint the differences between the original Team Rollins and the one that comes after it with Baron Corbin and the Revival, because these guys were handpicked by Seth Rollins. They don't join him of their own accord. He brings them in. He gives them the opportunity. And as such, like, their ties aren't as strong. So when Baron Corbin and the Revival betray Seth Rollins, it falls back more on Seth Rollins. It's his fault, because he had guys like Blake and Murphy who came in and they wanted to work for Seth, but Seth just mistreated them constantly, and eventually it wasn't them who left. Seth Rollins kicked them out because they couldn't perform. They couldn't live up to expectations. So the Revival gets involved, and no, maybe they did. Now I might be misremembering my own history, but really, if Blake and Murphy, if I'm remembering correctly, I think they did leave Rollins high and dry during a match, and that's when the Revival went after them. But with Blake and Murphy, at that point, like, they had been pushed too far. Like, Rollins had continuously mocked them. He's like, okay, you do this is your last shot. I've given you opportunities, but you really got to prove yourself, otherwise you don't belong here. And then they don't prove themselves, like, they lose. But Rollins is still like, bleh, you're losers. I'm gonna bring in these guys, the Revival. Because, like, when the Revival show up, Blake and Murphy are still working for Rollins, but it's almost like Rollins has already replaced them, like, before they're even gone. Like, he's bringing in the Revival just to say, like, hey, you could go out there and, you could go out and, let's say maybe you lose the match. Well, that's fine. If you don't win, that's fine. But, these boys are here. They can take over for you if you can't get the job done. Because, if you can't win the tag titles on your own, then, it's okay. I've got plan B. So, don't worry about it. But it's almost like, yeah, you don't have to do something, but implying like, yeah, you have to do it. Because otherwise you're kind of, you're out the door already. You just gotta, it's your job to get back in. Like, prevent yourself from being kicked out. So, yeah, having Blake and Murphy come in of their own accord, it's just a way to show the differences between Seth and the Revival. And then again, when those guys betray Rollins, it's all his fault, because he's the one who mistreated the people who he had before, the people who appreciated him, who actually wanted to work for him, and they weren't just hired guns. Because even with Big Show, there was a bit of a difference there, because, like, Rollins gets rid of Big Show and brings in Baron Corbin, whereas, like, Big Show, he does get brought in by Seth, but he's not a new guy. He can do whatever he wants. He's Big Show. He's a legend. So, it was kind of a mutual thing that he would help out Seth and be his muscle, his big bodyguard. But with Baron Corbin, Seth personally recruits him and brings him in. So, there's a difference there in how the dynamics of each incarnation of Team Rollins plays out. And now we can jump back to the title versus title match. The match was really cool. I liked it. You obviously have, like, I didn't do the big, like, kick out of a finisher thing, but I did kind of make up for that by having each guy steal each other's finishers, which is a thing that, like, Stone Cold and The Rock would do. I think that's where they really started it. I'm trying to think, did anyone else steal each other's finishers before Stone Cold and The Rock? Let me know in the comments, but I know that was one of the big things with their feud. But yeah, like, you had Cesaro hit a clash with a Titus ONeil with a neutralizer through the announce table. Like, there were a lot of really cool moments in this match. You had not just Cesaro performing a suicide dive, but then Titus ONeil hit a suicide dive, which was one of those more OMG moments, because this is Titus ONeil. He, like, with what WWE has done with him, his moveset is so basic, and he just doesn't really move around like that. Like, that's, I don't know. So having him do the suicide dive in the match, because, like, I think I might have had Titus do that one or two more times after this, but it's not something that I really made a staple of Titus's arsenal. Whereas Cesaro, he does suicide dives pretty frequently, but Titus never really does that. So when he pulls it out here in the title match, it's like, holy crap, Titus just did a suicide dive. What is he? Whoa. It really kind of really works to build up the scale of this matchup. beyond the build-up it had already gotten. Like, within the match itself, the moves they're using. Each guy really kind of empties their arsenals. You have the trademark fall-away slam from the top rope from Titus. You have the Cesaro swing is in there. Like I said, both guys hit a suicide dive, the announce table spot, a bunch of European uppercuts. But ultimately, it comes down to Cesaro finishing it off with a neutralizer. And Cesaro is now a dual champion. He's the Intercontinental Champion and the United States Champion simultaneously. So I bet this is going to be the start of something great for Cesaro. Oh boy, does he have any idea what's coming for him. Because obviously then, Kevin Owens comes in. He debuts in the very first Cesaro Intercontinental Championship Open Challenge, and Kevin Owens defeats Cesaro. And that will eventually lead to Cesaro's downward spiral, where he'll lose the US title, kind of fade into irrelevancy for a bit, but then build himself back up to win the Royal Rumble. So it's kind of a... I wouldn't necessarily call it that the hero... Like, that moment in the story where the hero reaches his lowest point, but it kind of was that, like, because obviously he loses all of his titles, and really his spot on the card, he kind of falls off. So, yeah, it does fulfill that role in the story, but I don't think I possibly knew that at the time. I was just kind of taking everything away from him. Yeah, so I did know it. That's what I was kind of going for. But yeah, as far as the match itself goes, like I said, this is the only thing stopping Ambrose and Rollins from taking the match of the night. Because this one, I think this was great. Now, if you're not a fan of, like, guys stealing each other's finishers, if that doesn't really do it for you, this matchup might fall a little flat, because I did have other things, like Titus hitting European uppercuts in there. So it was a lot of mind games, a lot of back and forth. But as far as this pay-per-view, I'm going to talk about the brand supremacy first, because that's, it is kind of, no, it's got to go to SmackDown, because, Ryback and Edge... Ryback versus Edge and Lesnar versus Cena were kind of on the same wavelength. I think Lesnar versus Cena might have been a little weaker in the build-up, but in the purpose it needed to serve, I think it was a little stronger, because John Cena, this credible guy, gets really destroyed by Lesnar. So, yeah, it's kind of, they even out, sort of. They're kind of on the same wavelength. The number one contenders match with Rusev and Orton was obviously building to something, and then you have, like, New Day versus Stardust, Barrett, and Sheamus, which was building off of something and also building up Stardust, so they're kind of on the same level. The Ascension versus Kid and Swagger was very underwhelming, probably the worst. It might be the worst on the card, but the Divas title match was also, like, technically speaking, like, as far as the match itself goes, the quality of the in-ring performance, the Divas title was better, but it ultimately didn't mean anything because the Divas division was done. So there's really nothing that could come from that. At least with the tag title match, the Ascension wins and they continue to look strong. But yeah, the WWE title match, it was stronger than Ambrose versus Rollins, I feel. Even though Ambrose versus Seth Rollins, it was another really good moment on the card. So it's a close call between the two shows. But personally, I'm going to give the edge to SmackDown. Yeah, I just think they were just slightly stronger. They just did a little bit more with just because also the title versus title match was unprecedented. It was not only was it the match of the night, but it was the first time I had really done a title versus title match, like have two champions fight and put both of their titles on the line. The champion versus champion match has been done to death before. Even in my series, I've done it numerous times. But to actually have both titles on the line, that was something I hadn't done before. And to make that the main event, to put both of the mid-card titles in the spotlight and have it work, because this feud had a better build-up than Lesnar versus Cena or Ryback versus Edge. Both world title matches paled in comparison. So it not only was it an experiment as far as putting the mid-card belts in the main event, but it worked, and I think it was a great way to close out the pay-per-view. So yeah, I think I gotta give the edge to SmackDown on this one. And as far as where Night of Champions lands in the rankings, it definitely falls short of SummerSlam. Oh, man, because let me take a look back at Money in the Bank. It's a tough call because Money in the Bank definitely, I think, is more, like, all the feuds, I think, or not all of them, but, like, the majority of the feuds are more structurally sound. But I think Night of Champions at points hits higher highs than Money in the Bank does. But, I I would say it also hits lower lows. So then when it comes to Payback also is also it's a tough call because Payback also doesn't hit the same highs as even Money in the Bank does, let alone Night of Champions. And while the lower Payback isn't Payback is also, I think, more structurally sound in some instances, I guess as a whole than Night of Champions was, but I think I'm gonna have to put Night of Champions above Payback, just below Money in the Bank. It might not have the same scale as Payback, where there was a lot of finality to it, but the benefit for Night of Champions is that it is setting up a lot of different storylines. There are a couple of payoffs in here as well, like Stardust versus New Day. That 6-man tag does kind of wrap that feud up. Most of a lot of this pay-per-view is set up, but you do have Cesaro versus Titus, which is that's conclusive. That champion versus champion feud is over. Ambrose versus Rollins was another solid match, continuing their feud. It's not conclusive, but it is sort of the end of, I guess, chapter 1 of that story, Seth versus Ambrose, because then at this point Ambrose is gonna, at Battleground, face off against other guys that are working for Seth, but not challenging Seth directly, so it does push him down a peg. So yeah, I'm gonna say that Night of Champions was stronger than Payback, but weaker than Money in the Bank. In these instances now, it's gonna get a lot tougher because some of the shows have moments that exceed anything that happened in the previous shows, but as a whole, just don't quite measure up. So I think that's where Night of Champions falls. It's definitely not as good as SummerSlam, and I think it just falls a little short of Money in the Bank as well. So we'll wrap things up here today with King of the Ring, which is actually its own pay-per-view this time around. Last time it was just another part of the Night of Champions pay-per-view, but this time I wanted to put more emphasis on the King of the Ring, just because I felt as though the Night of Champions one was really lackluster. This one, the matches were also, in 2K14, I did most of the first round matchups as just kind of like a recap highlights thing, which worked for the type of series I was producing at the time, but with 2K16, where now I was dedicating it more so to making it look like an actual production, like an actual show, I wanted to showcase everything. So I thought the best way to do that was to have a King of the Ring pay-per-view. Just make it its own show, really go all out with the matches, have narrative arcs going on throughout the matches that would build from round 1 all the way up to the finale of it. Now, this King of the Ring tournament definitely has room for improvement. Some of the superstars involved are kind of weird, SmackDown, you have Connor of the Ascension in there. I guess having Darren Young is a little weird. I don't know, because Darren Young hadn't quite had a super strong build-up going into this, but you don't see guys like Sheamus or Wade Barrett in there. There are other couple of guys who maybe could have been more credible in this spot, but they just don't get it. With Monday Night Raw, you also have Zack Ryder is in there, because I kind of wanted to, with Zack Ryder, I've always been kind of 50-50 with him, because part of me really wants to push him. I really want him, because WWE overlooked him for so long. I do like Zack Ryder. I'd really like him to be a champion in my series. He was at one point. He was the tag team champion. And at a point, I felt as though he could have been US champ. I just didn't really strike on that. But then I think about it with all the other superstars that I'm bringing in and want to push over him. He just falls into the mix. There's just no room for him. It's kind of like the Sandow effect. But with Ryder, I've at least tried to keep him relevant in ways. So he makes it into this tournament to kind of, I don't know, it's kind of like one last hurrah for him as a singles guy. And then Curtis Axel is in there as well. Curtis Axel suffers from the same issue where I really wanted to push him as well, but just didn't have room for him. There were other guys who took priority, and as time would go along, more and more people would take priority. There were more and more guys who would usurp him, who would surpass him on the card. Because you think with Axel, there was a point where he could have been Intercontinental Champion. He was in rivalries with Ryback, with Christian, back when they were the champions. So Axel could have got it done. He was in matches with Daniel Bryan. So Axel had top spots at points, but he would always be on the losing end. He could never really live up to them. He would always fall short. But then with Viva Perfecto, Del Rio was taken out from the game because he had left the company. So I used Del Rio to put over Axel and give him some direction. Then he joins forces with Sandow, so both guys, while not really doing anything, now had a team which would try to help keep them more relevant. But ultimately, Axel's not going to go over Rusev in the first round. That just isn't going to happen. So, in the first round matchups, there is an empty spot there that was meant to be like a mystery reveal. Of course, it was Rob Van Dam, who he had history with Seth Rollins in the past. Seth Rollins had put him on the shelf for a bit because Van Dam had left the company as well, so they took him out of 2K16. But Van Dam was also, he was a Universe Mode original, so I didn't quite want to get rid of him. So I brought him back in 2K16. And then eventually I decided not to bring him back for 2K17, but then he came back in 2K18. What the heck, 2K? Why are you doing this to me? So yeah, Van Dam, because by the time I wrote him out in 2K16, I could have brought him back for 2K18, but like he's done. It's the same with Batista, where I've brought them back so many times. It's like they've served their purpose, and since I don't really know if they're going to be in the next game or not, there's that sense of it where I don't really need to bring them in, but also there's the in-universe sense where I don't really need to bring them in. They've kind of served their purpose. Their career is mostly done in the series. They did everything they could do. But here, Rob Van Dam comes back, and this is the opening match of the King of the Ring pay-per-view. It's Seth Rollins versus Rob Van Dam, and Seth Rollins defeats Rob Van Dam. There was no way that Van Dam was going to beat Seth here. It was going to be Seth going over. Seth, because Seth Rollins was one of the top guys I wanted to push in this King of the Ring tournament. So bringing back Van Dam, who is a credible established legend who I had built up in the series prior, who had history with Seth, it made sense to bring him back. And also, this would, in a way, plant some seeds for the 5-on-5, because Ambrose needs allies, so Van Dam has history with Seth, so RVD can join Ambrose. So that there is a little bit more going on there than just a return and defeat for RVD. Then, like I said, Rusev defeats Curtis Axel in the next matchup. Not really it's predictable there. Like, Axel was not going to beat Rusev. Rusev was another guy who I wanted to look strong. And then, of course, he's going to go on to fight Seth Rollins, which will also work towards the 5-on-5 at Survivor Series, because, well, I'll get to that when that matchup happens. Then we have Dean Ambrose versus Zack Ryder. Obviously, Ambrose was going to win here. Zack Ryder was not going to defeat Dean Ambrose. So, yeah, Ambrose wins, moves on to the next round, because I wanted him to look good as well. Then it's Christian versus Cesaro. This was interesting in that maybe Christian could have had a bigger role in this King of the Ring tournament, but really with the way I wanted things to work out, he just was not at the top of my priority list. Like, looking at everybody else, like, the pecking order, you have, like, Seth Rollins at number 1, Cesaro was probably number 2, Rusev and Ambrose were both in the mix as well. Christian would have been the next guy there, but unfortunately for him, only 4 guys can move on to the second round, so Christian was gonna lose to somebody. And, like, Seth had RVD, that matchup needed to happen. What else could I have done? Christian could have gone up against Ambrose, but, like, there's not really much of a history between them. Christian and Rusev, same. With Christian and Cesaro, though, I remember... No, wait, hold on. They had some history with each other at one point. I think Christian had answered one of Cesaro's US Open challenges. At some point, it happened. So they did have a bit of history with one another, because I remember at the Night of Champions, the promo thing for the title versus title match, Christian had made a comment about Cesaro, and he's like, I still have a bone to pick with him. So there was some history between them. So having Cesaro get rid of Christian in the first round, that was one of, I guess, like, the potential surprise eliminations early on. Not really like a bracket buster, because who would have expected Christian to beat Cesaro? I mean, with the push I had been giving Cesaro, there's no way. Except maybe, like, the loss to Kevin Owens prior to this might have shaken some people, but yeah, Cesaro was going to go over Christian here. It's a former world champion he can defeat, so it's a good way of building up Cesaro. And then he's going to go on to fight Ambrose, so, like, he's already going up against Ambrose, who's a pretty credible guy. That might have been one of the more unpredictable matches on the card, because, like, the way it's set up, it almost looks like I could be building towards Dean versus Seth again. So Cesaro might get knocked out, so there's a potential, like, is he going to get it done? Is he not? And the same kind of goes with Rusev, because he's going up against Seth, so it's like, it's going to be Ambrose versus Rollins, right? That's what he's going for, so Rusev and Cesaro are probably going to get knocked out, but we'll get back to that in the second round. Jumping back over to SmackDown, Darren Young versus Mark Henry. This was a very clear story match. Darren Young was not going to beat Mark Henry. Mark Henry was not only the Well, he was the former King of the Ring winner, so I was going to build him up to look strong. I mean, he's Mark Henry. That's what he does. He's the world's strongest man, for crying out loud. So Darren Young, I wanted him to be in this tournament because, I mean, like, looking at the superstars who are in this tournament compared to last year's, there are a couple of returning faces, like Seth Rollins comes back. He was in last year's. Cesaro was in last year's. He comes back. Darren Young was one of them. Technically, Stardust was Cody Rhodes, so he was in there. Jericho as well was in last year's. But that was basically it. There was like 4 or 5 guys who had been in both that came back. So I kind of wanted to keep that... Oh, Mark Henry as well, obviously. So there was 6. But I wanted Darren Young to return, not only because he had been in the first, but that was also like a key part of the story with Titus O'Neil was that, like, the way that Darren Young beat Titus to qualify for last year's King of the Ring, the 2K14 one, was part of the thing that led into Titus O'Neil's inferiority complex, part of why it developed in the first place. So having Darren come back and then get squashed by Mark Henry, it was a way to kind of, like, I was building back to a Titus face turn. That's what happens in this King of the Ring tournament. Titus, he enters the tournament as a heel. He's just lost his Intercontinental title to Cesaro, but by the end of it, he is now basically a babyface because he goes up against some heels in the final, and it seems like the odds are stacked against him because there's interference and whatnot. But yeah, Darren was set up to lose. He was a lamb set out to slaughter, which again, I didn't really do a whole lot with Darren. He was mainly just a vehicle to progress Titus, unfortunately. I could have done more with him. He deserved more, but I just couldn't. At the time, I couldn't really think of anything. So Henry beats him here, and I do think it was a strong story device, because, like, you have Henry take down Darren, and I think there might have been a point where Henry was going to, like, keep attacking him, but Titus comes out to stop him. So, like, that's a way to bring Darren and Titus slowly back together, like, slowly plant the seeds to build into a Primetime Players reunion. But here's where they kind of bury the hatchet initially, like a little bit. Like, they don't really bury the hatchet until, like, the build up to Fastlane when the Primetime Players actually reunite. But here it's like, yeah, okay, you know, I respect you. The match at SummerSlam, it changed the dynamic between them, because before, Titus just looked at Darren as, like, a guy he had to get rid of, like a dark part of his past that kind of dragged him down. But then at SummerSlam, Darren Young really takes him to the limit, and then Titus sees that Darren is a strong competitor, and he says, okay, you know, maybe you're not as weak as I thought you were. Maybe you're not useless to me. And that seems really, really harsh on the part of Titus. He seems really cold, like the heel, but, I mean, the thing about him becoming face and working towards the Primetime Players reunion is that he will overcome that and become more sympathetic. So Henry squashes Darren in this match. Titus comes out to, I guess, prevent it from going any further. Then Titus takes on Connor. Titus obviously beats Connor. I guess the thing with this was that Connor was one half of the tag team champions, so I think I'd also kind of been working a little bit towards something with the Primetime Players in the Ascension, kind of building a bit of a story there, because I think they might have had something happen before, but I don't know, this was sort of planting the seeds for something later on down the line. But here, of course, Titus beats Connor. Connor was not, I mean, he was just a guy to get rid of. There was no way, no one would have ever believed that Connor of the Ascension would win the King of the Ring tournament. He was by far, I think, one of the weaker entries in this tournament. Definitely the weakest on the SmackDown side of things. But, yeah, he was the guy for Titus to overcome, make Titus look strong. And, yeah, he did that. Then it was Stardust versus Chris Jericho. This one was another, like, a potential bracket buster, you could say. Because, like, with Christian and Cesaro, it was a way to make Cesaro look strong by having him overcome a former world champion. With Stardust and Jericho, if anyone still had any doubts that Stardust was not going to be a legitimate threat in my series, this was a way to get rid of that, dispel that. So Stardust takes on Jericho, and this was, I think, the debut of the crossface chicken wing, where, yeah, he forces Jericho to tap out in it. So, not only does he beat Jericho, he makes him tap. So Jericho, like, in the last year's tournament, he'd at least made it to the second round, where he was defeated by The Undertaker. So Jericho in the King of the Ring tournament had a pretty good history to that point. Like, he hadn't won the thing or made it super far in it, but, I mean, he had at least won a match in it. But here, Stardust knocks him out in the first round, which might have been a bit of a shocker. Like I said, if anybody thought I wasn't going to take Stardust seriously, this was the ultimate like, final nail in that coffin, like, yeah, he's going to be a big deal. Keep an eye on Stardust. And then in the final round of the tournament, it's Neville versus Roman Reigns. Of course, like I said, Adrian Neville qualified by beating Corey Graves at SummerSlam, but he was not going to go over Roman Reigns here. It was not going to happen. I mean, I like Adrian Neville, and I am kind of trying to work him into potentially a main event program. Like, I've given him the shot. I've given him the ball once before when he took on Kevin Owens at the Royal Rumble, which was, of course, after this, but, you know, just speaking in, like, modern terms now. But, like, where I am in the series right now, I would like Neville to be in the main event, because I do think he's an incredibly gifted athlete, very undervalued by the WWE. I don't know if he's actually been released or not, or if those were just rumors, but with Neville, he was one of my favorite guys in NXT. His NXT championship reign was incredible. It was one of my favorite title reigns in NXT. Like, the way he was not, like, he was kind of acting heelish, but he wasn't a heel, because, like, he was a champion, he was doing what he had to do to retain the title, and, but he was still friends with Sami Zayn, he still respected Sami Zayn, so, like, I liked how he could ride that middle ground, where he wasn't a heel, but he was kind of showing heel tendencies, but he was really just doing what a champion needs to do to retain the title, like the way he would win his matches, especially like the Fatal 4-Way at TakeOver Fatal 4-Way, where he kind of shoves Sami out of the ring and takes the pin from him, sort of like he steals his efforts. Like, that's what you would do in a matchup like that as a champion, whether you're a heel or a face. Like, you'd wanna capitalize and do what you can to retain the title. Like, honor is all well and good, but it doesn't always work. Again, bit of a tangent there, but Neville was not going to go over Roman Reigns here, with the issue of not knowing who was going to be in the main event. Like, with Cena getting taken out Night of Champions, somebody had to look good. So Roman Reigns, if I had him lose to Neville in the first round, it could have elevated Neville for sure, but I was not going to put Neville in the WWE title picture that early. He just didn't have it at that point. I needed to put more focus on him, more time into him, before I would actually go through with that. With Roman Reigns, he'd already been in a WWE title match before, so he was the next logical person to kind of tide me over until the King of the Ring winner would get his title match at Survivor Series. So Reigns beats Neville here. It needed to happen. Would I have liked to give Neville the upset win here? Possibly. But I don't know. Having Reigns win and then go on to fight Stardust was also partially made to continue building up Stardust, to show that he could go up against, like, not just beat Jericho, but go up against a guy like Roman Reigns, who was another really top contender on SmackDown, and really give him a run for his money. But now we jump into the second round, going back over to Monday Night Raw. Seth Rollins versus Rusev. This one, pretty good back and forth match. This was sort of, like, not only was it a setup to the Survivor Series 5-on-5, but it would eventually lead to a match at Battleground, where Seth Rollins takes on Rusev, which really was set up here because Seth Rollins and Rusev are going back and forth. Rusev is he's backing him up into a corner, like, not literally, metaphorically speaking, he's got him on the ropes. But then there's a distraction by Kane, and then Big Show chokeslams him through the announce table and kind of gets rid of him. Seth Rollins throws him back in, hits him with a pedigree, and pins him. So Seth wins. It's a dodgy finish for sure. But like I said, with Seth, like, he does have to, like, not necessarily look cowardly, but like, if he's a heel, he can't just win every match clean, because, like, there's got to be something to him. He's not a guy like Kevin Owens, where the reason why Kevin Owens is a heel is that not only he wins all of his matches and backs up what he says, but that he wins very convincingly, sometimes even injuring his opponents, ending their careers even, in certain instances. So Seth Rollins, he's not that type of guy. He's not a monster heel. He's talented, he can hold his own, but he can't always do that. And the reason why why you're supposed to hate him, why he's a heel, is that he does cheat to win, which he does here over Rusev. And this, of course, gets Seth into the next round, and it also plants some seeds that, like, well, this King of the Ring tournament might not quite go as planned, because Seth Rollins has got pawns in his back pocket, so anyone who goes up against him had better watch out. So Seth beats Rusev, and at this point, it might have looked like Ambrose versus Rollins was a lock. I don't know, because, like, I don't remember exactly what people were saying back at the time this was airing, but I kind of wanted to give people that impression that it was going to be Ambrose versus Rollins in the King of the Ring, but I didn't want that to happen yet, because think about it, we had just come off of 2 straight pay-per-views where Ambrose and Rollins had fought, and Rollins had beaten him on both occasions due to some technicalities, but, like, I mean, Night of Champions was fairly conclusive. I mean, he beat him in the steel cage by escaping, so it's not the end, but he has certainly beaten Ambrose, and Ambrose doesn't really have another reason. Like, it's not like there's a rubber match to build to. Ambrose has lost twice in a row. He's got to do more than that to get another match with Seth. So, then there's Cesaro, who had, of course, just lost the Intercontinental title, but he was coming off of a really strong year as the United States champion, and he still had that title. He doesn't lose the U.S. title until Battleground, but I wanted him to beat Ambrose here, not just to surprise people, potentially, that would be like a real bracket buster, like Cesaro knocking out Ambrose, because everyone might have thought it's going to be Rollins versus Ambrose, but Cesaro swoops in and takes it out. And this is a face versus face matchup, which walking a fine line with that, because the thing, like, you're going up against Seth, so you don't want to have it be heel versus heel, but the fact that Ambrose gets knocked out of the tournament without fighting Rollins could definitely rub people the wrong way with the guy who beats him. But having it be Cesaro, having it be a very back-and-forth contest, and there's no dodgy finish with it, it's very conclusive. Cesaro just has more left in the tank. He beats Ambrose. I think Cesaro is probably the best guy for that spot. If you want to have a guy who is going, like a face who you don't want to turn heel, but give them something that could perhaps turn people off on him a bit, Cesaro was the best guy for the task. And I think it just worked. It was a smart decision. Cesaro's still the U.S. champ, so he's still looking strong, even though he's coming off of a loss with Kevin Owens. But there definitely is the question of, can he get the job done against Seth? Because he's now looking a little rocky. His foundation has been shaken by Owens, and that's kind of a narrative that'll keep building with Cesaro going forward. So that will set up the Raw final between Seth Rollins and Cesaro. But first, we have to get through the SmackDown quarterfinals, which had Mark Henry versus Titus O'Neil. This was, of course, everything had been set up from the Darren Young-Mark Henry matchup. So the former King of the Ring winner, Mark Henry, steps up against Titus, and I could have done a lot with Mark Henry in this tournament. Obviously, I could have had him, if I really wanted to, have him come back and win the King of the Ring tournament again, and really bring back the Hall of Pain, have him, have a career resurgence. But honestly, at this point, Mark Henry was on his way out, and he still is in the series. Now Henry is more so a guy who puts people over. He makes the young talent look good, but at the same time, I try to treat him with as much credibility as I can, because he is a former world champion. He is a former King of the Ring winner. So Henry, the thing about him is that, because this is part of his personality in real life, is that there are certain guys in the locker room that Henry looks out for. I know, in certain interviews with him, he's talked about there are certain guys in that locker room who just, really stand out and he thinks could be great. And he kind of watches out for him. He's kind of like a mentor in the locker room. Not say, maybe the Undertaker role where he completely controls the locker room. He's the big guy you fall back on. But Mark Henry, he's a guy that people can look to for experience. He's a wall that sometimes people have to overcome, like I did with Daniel Bryan, to really kind of bring something else out of somebody. But Mark Henry, I mean, he's a guy, the difference I think between him and someone like Big Show, who I've handled in my series, is that Big Show just doesn't quite have the same presence as Mark Henry. Big Show wasn't a former world champion, and Big Show really has disappeared since his main event match with Dolph Ziggler, main event on Raw, going into the Royal Rumble. Big Show just kind of disappeared. I haven't really done anything with him since. But that's just because Big Show doesn't have the same presence. With Mark Henry, you could say that I should just stop using him, because, I mean, his, the prime of his career, it's over. He's done the majority of what he needs to do, and I could have him leave and just have that be the end of it. But I also think that there is something that can be said about keeping a veteran talent around who, really his job is just to put people over, but also, doing that in such a way that also, doesn't completely ruin their legacy. With a guy like Mark Henry, like I said earlier, he sticks around as one of the big guys in the locker room. Sometimes he's there to give advice. Sometimes he's a mountain that people need to overcome, like I did with Daniel Bryan, where he'll bring out something extra in them, that extra aggression or whatever they need. So with Titus in this instance, obviously there's the credibility of him being the former King of the Ring winner, so in a way, because of that, he's one of the favorites to win. So having Titus go through him after Henry had taken out his former friend, former ally as well, that's the same thing. Former friend turned enemy, Darren Young, and also kind of planting the seeds for the Primetime Players reunion. There's a lot going on with Henry in this tournament. He's a guy who Titus needs to beat for more, like, not just because he needs to beat him to look credible, obviously, because that's the big purpose of it, but also he needs to beat him from, like, a moral perspective, because if Henry goes through both members of the Primetime Players here, after Titus just kind of stood up for Darren Young, then what's the point? They both look weak. Titus has to go through Henry. So he does. And that puts Titus O'Neil in the finals, the SmackDown finals, which I guess is the semifinals of the King of the Ring tournament. This show was split over 2 parts, because I think what I did was I had all the first round matchups in part 1, and then I had the quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals in part 2, was what I did with it. I'm not a big fan of the 2-part structure, but with something like the King of the Ring tournament, as well as my production schedule at the time, where this was at the point where I was getting ready to graduate high school and go off to college, so there was a lot of planning going on there, a lot going on in my personal life that could distract me from the show, so I had to split it in 2 parts just for the sake of getting content out there so that people had something to go on. Titus goes through Mark Henry, and having Titus in the finals of the SmackDown bracket might have been a bit of a surprise. Definitely, if you just look at the names, not really the names of this SmackDown tournament, because not a whole lot of star power here, but with the way the brackets are structured, like, I could have definitely put Chris Jericho up against Titus instead of Stardust, but I felt as though Stardust needed the credibility more than Titus, because you think about it, Titus had been the Intercontinental Champion for a good while, one of the longer Intercontinental title reigns in the series, so Titus had a lot of time to build himself up, so I didn't think he needed a guy like Chris Jericho to go over. Connor was the tag team champion, so there's a bit of star power there, but not a whole lot. But then Mark Henry was perhaps the first shocker, because maybe you could have seen it as, like, Henry's going to beat Titus and then fight, I don't know, Roman Reigns, because, like, Roman Reigns in the bottom half of the bracket is the guy who looks the strongest. So maybe that's what people thought could have been coming, but I mean, maybe I had considered that at one point, because I don't think that Titus was my original pick, because the thing with the King of the Ring tournaments is that things, like, plans change a lot. With, like, the first King of the Ring tournament, there was no plan at all. Anything could have happened. With this one, I had been tossing around different ideas for a while as to who could have won. I had considered Seth Rollins winning the King of the Ring tournament at a point. I had considered Roman Reigns winning the King of the Ring tournament at one point. I might have covered this in a Pretend It Never Happened video before. I don't recall. But my first pick was Roman, but that was, like, way before the King of the Ring tournament. We're talking, like, before SummerSlam even. Then I went with Seth. This was still, I think, before maybe around SummerSlam. And then I had maybe considered giving it to Cesaro to have him go into potentially a title match with Brock Lesnar, have him jump shows, because he had already done the thing with the Intercontinental title. But then I decided, you know what, let's pick a dark horse. Let's pick someone that people might not expect. So Titus goes through Mark Henry here, moves on to the SmackDown Finals, and he will take on the winner of Stardust Roman Reigns, which was Roman Reigns. With Stardust, the thing about me wanting him to be credible is that I wanted him to go after the Intercontinental title. I did not want him in the main event scene just yet. So if I had had him beat Jericho and then beat Reigns, and potentially even beat Titus and go into the finals of the tournament, that would have put a little too much spotlight on him, which is not what I wanted. Like I said, he was still an upper mid-card guy in that Intercontinental title division, but he was not a main eventer. So I had to make that distinction clear. And after having Stardust beat Jericho, I mean, I guess no matter who Reigns faced, he would have been going up against a credible opponent, but Reigns was not going to lose here. It was too soon for that. And again, the whole issue with the main event, I needed Reigns to look good in this tournament if I was going to have him be like the next middleman to give Lesnar something to do until Survivor Series. So that sets up Titus O'Neil versus Roman Reigns in the SmackDown finals. But before that, we jump back over to Raw, Seth Rollins versus Cesaro. And at this point, there's a lot of different possibilities you can consider, which is definitely a consideration you have to make when you're setting up a King of the Ring tournament, is setting up expectations that are gradually they're going to be knocked down. But looking at the overall brackets of this thing, like I said, there could have been Ambrose versus Rollins. People might have suspected. Looking at the SmackDown side of things, even just in the quarterfinals, you could have potentially seen Titus versus Darren again. Like I said, maybe Mark Henry Reigns or Jericho Reigns or something, or Stardust Neville, just different things. But really, looking then at the bigger picture, the Raw versus SmackDown side of things, potentially I could have been setting up Cesaro versus Titus O'Neil. That was another thing to kind of set up expectations. Or I could have been setting up Seth Rollins versus Roman Reigns. I think those were the two big, I don't know, because it wasn't like the King of the Ring matchups happened over the course of Raw and SmackDown stuff or whatever, which is a bit of a spoiler, I guess, but that's what I'm going to be doing this year for 2K18 when I get around to the King of the Ring tournament. There's not going to be a King of the Ring special just because I think it slows down the progression of the calendar month. Instead, I'm going to stagger out the matches over the course of several Raw and SmackDown episodes, kind of like what Brennan Plays did. But the thing about doing that is that there's a chance to build up speculation, build up a bunch of different predictions. With the King of the Ring tournament all being in one show, there wasn't really a chance for anybody to comment that, like, oh, these are my predictions for what's going to happen in the first round. This is what I think could happen in the second round. And then see, like, how that happened and be like, oh, okay, so I was wrong here. Maybe I think this is going to happen. But if this had been spaced out a bit more and not all in one show, it would have been interesting to see what people would have thought of, like, where the finals were going to go. Because, like I said, you have two very strong possibilities there. Like, with good storylines backing it. With Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins, less of a storyline, but more so history with the Shield. So you could see that coming, potentially. Or Cesaro versus Titus O'Neil, which obviously, hot off the heels of the Night of Champions title versus title match, definitely a real possibility. But instead, I hit people with probably the least expected matchup. Seth Rollins, he beats Cesaro, no interference this time, which I think was necessary because at this point now, you're deep into the King of the Ring tournament. And this is all in one night, especially, so fatigue is going to be setting in. These matchups will be much less drawn out as some of the earlier ones would be. I think more so the quarterfinals was the big opportunity to have the high-octane, high-profile matchups, because usually what you would see is, like, in the first round, Adrian Neville gave it his all, because that's going to be the last you'll see of him in the tournament, so he really goes all out. But Roman Reigns really kind of meets the tempo there, but there's still a little bit more to expect from Reigns as he beats Neville. But as you go through the tournament, you're gonna pull out all the stops over the course of the thing. Like, people are gonna dig more into the bag of tricks. First round, you want to save your energy, so you're not gonna hit the person with everything unless you're really struggling to beat that guy, in which case you might. But then if you use everything against this superstar, then you're gonna definitely have some trouble in the next matchup, which could give that person the advantage. Having the tournament all in one night definitely adds that factor to the mix. But Seth Rollins had some outside interference in his match with Rusev, so he was a little bit more protected, whereas Cesaro had a hard-fought match with Christian, had a hard-fought match with Dean Ambrose. So, going into the match with Seth Rollins, I could have had Cesaro win here, but like I have said before, I wanted to take a step back with Cesaro before I launched him right into the world title picture, just because I was kind of worried that people would see it as, like, over-pushing. People would get sour on him because, like, he had the humongous reign as U.S. champ. Then if I launched him straight into the WWE title picture, or world title picture, rather, world heavyweight, because he was on Raw, I was worried that people might kind of start to sour on Cesaro, that maybe they thought, well, yeah, he's been winning all these matches, but can't you give somebody else a shot? So I went with Seth Rollins, just because I thought with Seth Rollins, with everything I was building him up to, I wanted him to go not all the way, but make it to the finals. Because, like, he's one of the top, with everything he had done with Ambrose, and now that he's got a whole faction of people backing him, I thought it would have made him look a little weak. Like, not much, because still, he's made it to the semifinals of the tournament, so he looks good either way. But with all these guys helping him to not even beat Cesaro, not even make it to the finals, would have been a little underwhelming, in my opinion. So having him beat Cesaro here worked, and also, it was to play up who he was going up against, which, obviously, Titus was turning face, not a full-fledged face at this point, so, again, people thought maybe it could have been Reigns. But yeah, giving Seth the win might have, again, also added more of a expectation for Reigns to win. But Titus beats Reigns to go on to face Seth Rollins. So now, if I wanted to make a complete face turn on this night, Titus could not go up against Cesaro, because Cesaro is a full-fledged babyface. And if Titus beats him, there might be a bit of backlash there. But here, because he's going up against Seth Rollins, who also gets assistance from Blake and Murphy in this match, you're gonna start to cheer for Titus, because Seth Rollins, not only is he's the top heel, he's just a heel in general, but he's already cheated in this tournament once before, but he's cheating again by having Blake and Murphy at ringside to cause distractions and whatnot. So you're going to rally behind Titus because he's got to go up against the odds now. And he's just had a grueling match with Roman Reigns as well. They've both had grueling matches throughout the course of the night, the course of the tournament. So yeah, you're going to start to back Titus. And then you get the outside interference to counteract Seth's plan. You have Darren Young and Dean Ambrose return to take out Blake and Murphy, which of course, not only does this further the storyline between Ambrose and Rollins, because you're having Ambrose take out Blake and Murphy, this also builds into the Battleground tag team matchup, but you also have the progression of the Titus Darren story, because Titus kind of came out to help Darren Young, save him from Mark Henry earlier in the night, so then you have Darren Young come back to reciprocate that. He helps out Titus in the King of the Ring finals to get rid of Blake and Murphy, leave it down to a one-on-one fight, and of course, Seth Rollins without his henchmen now, he's exhausted, he is defeated by Titus ONeil, and shock of shock, Titus ONeil wins the King of the Ring tournament. I really don't think that anybody would have seen this coming going into the tournament, because looking at the names that are on here, as far as SmackDown goes, I think Titus was one of the top names in this bracket, but you have guys like, maybe not Roman Reigns. Like, Roman Reigns is definitely up there, just because name value, Roman Reigns, you could think maybe it'll happen. Chris Jericho he's a veteran, so maybe there's a possibility there. Mark Henry as well, because he's the former King of the Ring winner, so possibility that I revive him there. But mainly, the big things you would expect, potentially, are your Cesaros, your Seth Rollinses. I think they were the top two. Dean Ambrose possibly as well was also in there. But there's a lot of potential, and then there's the mystery spot going into the tournament, which no one knew what it could have been, so maybe someone like upset Seth Rollins and goes on to take it all. So there's a lot of things to consider. I'm not going to say that anyone didn't predict Titus to win, but because I'm not saying it's not unpredictable that Titus would win, because he had quite a build-up as well. But I definitely don't think that most people would have expected Titus to come in and win. And that was, Titus was the last guy I settled on with this tournament. But prior to the tournament, I had decided he was going to win at least a decent bit in advance. Maybe it was post SummerSlam I settled on it, but I definitely knew that he was not the first guy I chose, but part of the reason why I chose him is because it's like with the Royal Rumble, where there's always that, the thing of anybody can win, but usually you know who's going to win. The same kind of goes with the King of the Ring tournament, where it's anybody Curtis Axel could beat Rusev and Seth Rollins and Cesaro and win the whole tournament, but there are certain guys aren't going to win, but still, there's a possibility of who is going to win this thing? Anybody could do it. And I wanted to hammer that home by having Titus win the whole thing, take out not only Mark Henry, the former King of the Ring winner, not only Roman Reigns, who was one of the top dogs on SmackDown, but to also take down Seth Rollins, who was one of the top heels in the company, who had been thwarting Dean Ambrose left and right. And there was a way to not only have his interference in his benefit, but also further the storyline with Darren and Titus, also further the storyline between Ambrose and Rollins. So, all in all, I think this King of the Ring tournament, there's a hell of a lot more going on with it than the 2K14 King of the Ring tournament, where everything just kind of happens randomly. This one, there's so many things to consider with it, not just in terms of, making match predictions, figuring out who's going to win the whole thing, but also, story components. There's a lot going on. Titus makes a full heel-face turn in this night throughout the course of the tournament, which I really liked. 2K14 had nothing even close to that. So I think it's one of the strongest aspects of this King of the Ring tournament. But, ranking it, it's tough to rank this in, the list of pay-per-views because it's, there are no title matches in it. But as far as, crafting a tournament to tell a story, I'm not to say that it can't be done better, because I do think you can do it better. There were certain aspects of this tournament that certainly were a little underwhelming, like some of the entries in it could have been better. But as far as like using a tournament to craft a story, to craft some character progression, character development, I don't think like you can do a whole lot better than that. Or at least like I think it was really well handled is what I mean to say. Like I've said you can do it better probably, but in the case of Titus, I don't think I could have handled his character progression in this tournament any better. Like, for that case specifically, I can't really think of anything else that I could have done to really hammer home his face turn. I think all the elements fell in place really well. But as far as a pay-per-view as a whole goes, I don't know, because I do like this, that the tournament crafts a story, but at the same time, it's just a sequence of one-on-one matches. There's not, like, there are stories that develop over the course of this tournament. There are stories going into it and stories coming out of it, and there is a story self-contained within the tournament itself, Titus's face turn. But at the same time, it's just a sequence of one-on-one matches. That's all it is. No, nothing to spice things up, no title matches, no triple threats, or any added stipulations. It's all just there. So, I don't know, I think this is actually better than Night of Champions to be... That's tough to say, though, because there's nothing else going on. It's all just singles matches. No, just because it's just a tournament, I don't think I can put it too high on this list. I'm going to rank it above... It's definitely above WrestleMania, because, I mean, yeah, there's, like, not huge sweeping payoffs with it, but I think it's a very well-told... and you can let me know in the comments what you think about this, what your personal take on it is. But, like, it's a really strong tournament. It has room for improvement, so I don't think it would be one of the top pay-per-views on the thing. Like, even just, like, if I was ranking King of the Ring tournaments, it'd be interesting to compare this to the one that I'll do for 2K18, seeing how I top it, or fail to do so. But I'm gonna put it above WrestleMania. Do I put it above TLC? Yeah, I'm gonna say, yeah, I'll put it above TLC, but do I put it above Payback? I'm gonna say above Payback, too. Why not? Because... like, with those pay-per-views, there are some filler matches involved, and this one does have filler matches, don't get me wrong. But over the course of the tournament, there are stories being crafted throughout, which is something that you can only do in a tournament. Like, there are certain specific things that I was able to do here that I couldn't do in just standard singles matches. Like, as far as just regular one-on-one with nothing else involved. I'm still going to keep it below Night of Champions and below Money in the Bank, because... like I said, there's nothing else really to spice things up. It's just a sequence of singles matches. And the people involved, not all of them are the best. It could be done better. It's just really tricky to place a tournament, like a pay-per-view, where the pay-per-view is the tournament, in a list of pay-per-views, because it's fundamentally different from everything else. But yeah, I'm going to throw it under Night of Champions, but above Payback, just because I think... I think that works. I think that's about where it belongs, because it's a really good tournament. But as a pay-per-view, I don't know, yeah, because it's fundamentally different as a pay-per-view, so it's tough to really go into the specifics with that. And, Raw versus SmackDown, it really just comes down to the strength of the brackets, and I think that's pretty obvious. Monday Night Raw has the edge in the brackets, because, like, at least with Raw, like, you do have your Curtis Axels and Zack Ryders in there, but you have, like, Seth Rollins, Rusev, Ambrose, Cesaro, and even Christian. They're believable contenders, and you have a bit of mystery with the RVD entry, which does actually pay off in a pretty satisfying way, Van Dam's return to get some revenge on Seth Rollins. But with SmackDown, you've got Connor, who doesn't really belong there. Darren Young, I mean, he served what he did what he needed to do. I mean, yeah, because Stardust and Jericho were good, Neville and Reigns were good. It is tough, but no, because the SmackDown side has a whole story crafted throughout it, so... I think I'm going to stick with Raw, though, just because, like, name value, there's more there. Man, this one's a lot tougher than with the 2K14, where it was very obvious. Because SmackDown has the strength with the storytelling, but that's not to say that Raw's storytelling is absent, because there's also a lot of setup for future stuff. Because I'm thinking, what does SmackDown do to set things up beyond this? Like, Titus turns face, but outside of the tournament, what really happens? So it's like, do I put emphasis on what sets up future events, or put emphasis on what makes this standalone pay-per-view a standout? I'm gonna I'm going to give it to Raw. I'm going to go with the future. I'm going to say whatever sets up future storylines directly is more impressive. Because you do have the Ambrose stuff, the Rollins stuff, Rollins-Rusev. Cesaro's not really involved, though. Okay, scratch. No, Raw. It's got to be Raw. Because even then, like, with part of the shock value with Titus winning is that Monday Night Raw had Cesaro and Rollins, which was a very strong... Like, there were a lot of strong contenders in the Raw side of things, which emphasizes the shock of a SmackDown guy winning it for the second year in a row. So, yeah, I'm going to give it to Raw, and I'm going to leave it there. And I already ranked the pay-per-view, so we're going to call it a day, call it a wrap for this edition. Thank you for joining me. Next time, we will cover the rest. Battleground, Survivor Series, and Fastlane. And that'll be it for 2K16. So thank you for joining me for another really long installment of Behind the Universe Raw vs. SmackDown. And until next time, keep on YouTubing.